To order, so if people want to come in and sit down, please, or not, make your choice. And we're going to begin presently.
You want to get in the door?
So,
The back door.
with that said, I am calling to order the 7:30 p.m. regular meeting of the Town of Corte Madera Planning Commission for May 9th, 2017. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Boyle, would you please call the roll?
I will. Good evening. Commissioner Friedman.
Here.
Commissioner Bundy. Here. Commissioner Caldera.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf. Commissioner Chase.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf is absent, and just for the record, she did email staff saying she was ill and unable to attend.
Correct, yes. All right. So now that we're all in our upright position here, at this point in the meeting, we open the meeting to public comment for anything that is not on the agenda tonight. So if you've got something on your mind you want to speak to the commission about that is not on tonight's agenda, please step up to the microphone and say what you have to. 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Jan Kaiser of 172 Prince Royal Drive here in Corte Madera. And I'd like to take up the issue of story poles. Now, last month we passed a resolution or approval on a project at 159 Prince Royal Drive, which is what I'm talking about. The owner of that property took down the story poles that had been on his property and were consistent with the rules that taking the poles down. Is his microphone on?
No, yeah. Just a moment.
Check your mic, is your recording?
Let me start over?
Yes, please.
Sorry, please.
Start over?
Yes, if you would mind, please.
I'm Jan Kaiser of 172 Prince Royal Drive, and I'd like to talk to you about story poles. The issue came up in an appeals hearing last Tuesday before the town council when a project that was approved by this board was faced with the fact that the story poles on that particular project had been removed pursuant to the rules of the planning department and this board. But since it was on appeal, the members of the town council would have nothing to look at to see the description of the property other than film and or conjecture. So I would suggest that you lengthen the time that story poles must remain erected until any appeals are heard by the judicial function of the town council. That's fairly simple. Now, another thing that I noticed that the original story poles on 159 Prince Royal Drive were flags, whereas the Major Design Review checklist, section 20, the last page of it, says that they must be netted. Now that new story poles have been erected on that property, it is much more clear as to the outline of the building, much more clear than when there were flags erected. If you have the opportunity, you might go up there with the next week or two and take a look. Not that it would change your decision, but at least would give you a different view than what you saw before.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes,
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Anyone else who has a comment, anything that's not on the agenda?
I'm Ted McKay at 36 Madera Boulevard here in Corte Madera. I was going to just say something briefly about Wind Cup. Is that a permitted topic here?
It's absolutely,
Probably heard enough of it. Well, not too long ago, I drove by and I saw it all completely covered in a white shroud. Well, since then, it looks like it's risen from the dead, and all these busy bees are hovering around and I guess trying to get rid of the infestation and replacing and all that. But it's this goes back from the origin, and I know it's way before any of the people here on the commission or the planning director. But it didn't seem like there was any environmental impact report, and I'm not sure if anyone actually went on site to examine the buildings that were sprouting up, whether they met fire standard or health and safety standards, or density restriction, or zoning requirement, and so on. So I think the developer, his name is Victor McFarland, he's opposite to his blowhard, big-time real estate counterpart back east, because he seems a very quiet person. I know next to nothing about him. He's never in the news or anything anywhere here locally. But I think that it's now it's ongoing. It's apparently more construction, but I think at the end result, it's a blight on the environment. But there's another issue I never hear discussed, is the issue of money. Were there investors? Where did the money come from to fund the project? Maybe sometimes in these huge schemes, maybe they're going to lose their money. In other cases, maybe there's investors who don't care, because in these type of schemes, sometimes there's a laundered money. So the whole thing is very secretive. And what's done is done. And I don't know what's going to be the end result of this, because it doesn't even look inhabitable to me. It's just like all these crammed up, spaces inside buildings. But I think going forward, it's hopefully a lesson learned to scrutinize monies and safety standards and density and zoning and structure, if it's structurally sound, et cetera. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else have any comment that they would like to offer to the commission? Seeing none, then we'll close the public comment section. I will take the liberty of addressing these just open-ended to the public, not particularly, but regarding story polls, they were reset, and it's agreed for another hearing. I believe the next town council hearing will have the 159 Prince Royal project before it with those story polls. They will see that. When it comes to Wind Cup, I believe it was 2 meetings ago, was it not, Phil, that the construction representative had a meeting, or had a presentation here at the council that
Yes.
really described everything, and I think that it can be safely said that the town is exercising every scrutiny for conformance. That's all I'm going to say. So, and it's quite extensive. So with that said, thank you for your comments. We have a continued hearing tonight, since there's nothing on the consent calendar, so we'll go right to what's known as the sign at the community center, 498 Tamalpais Drive, Community Center. Continued public hearing for design review and sign permit application for modification of the existing reader board sign at Corte Madera Community Center, including installation of a new lighted LED sign panel. We heard this once before, but I'll let Mr. Boyle go through the history and explain where we are tonight.
Thank you. And Mario from our Parks and Rec Department is here as well. Just giving a brief overview, yes, this was heard by you back in February. A number of issues came up and a number of questions you had for staff, and staff has responded to those. Basically, the reader board has the box itself that is being, well, I should back up. Our existing town sign is here. Currently, it looks pretty much exactly like that, and the letters itself are manually put up. One of Mario's staff puts it up early hours of the morning, and so there's a message on this side and there's a message on the other side, and so we have basically 2 messages per day. And Mario and the Park and Rec Department and the Park and Rec Commission have for quite a while wanted to modernize that sign to make it easier for staff and allow a greater variety of messages. The proposal is to basically just remove this interior box and insert an electronic one. And so the structure outside, the wood outside will remain. I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. So the new sign that's proposed is a double-sided digital panel, roughly 8 feet by 4 feet. The existing wood structure will stay. There is a letter from our Public Works Director and Town Engineer. He evaluated the wood structure and felt that it was substantial and adequate to house the new electronic box that will be put in. He also provided a letter based on the Commission's request regarding traffic safety, and it's in his professional opinion, the new sign and the way in which the new sign is to be used will not cause an impact to traffic or safety and will not distract drivers, to the best of his knowledge. The digital sign will allow a greater variety of messages. It will automatically adjust to outdoor brightness for all conditions. It can be manually adjusted. There will be no flashing or moving messages. Mario has changed the time in which it will be used. Originally had 7 to 9, Monday through Friday, weekends 10 to 8, and he's changed that to basically all week, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'm not sure if that was a specific request of the commission or just something that he decided to change. He can address that. No commercial messages are proposed, no religious messages or political messages. As we talked about before, there is a religious group that meets on Sundays, and that their advertising, I think, will exist, but no messages in terms of particular religions, just advertising their event. Obviously, the proposal will also make it easier on staff. Repeating myself a little bit. The things that have changed since February, the new sign will follow the same template as the existing sign. So you'll have 5 lines of text, 15 characters per line. The text will be black with a white background, similar to the existing. Maximum of 3 messages is per day, and messages will change every 60 to 90 seconds. So those are the changes from before, and that really concludes my report. Mario may have other things to add. Did not received actually 2 citizens came in late last week, just wanting some additional information about the sign and how it will be used, and I gave them some more details. We just explained the staff report to them. And staff is recommending approval of this design review application and sign permit application.
All right, thank you. All right, Mario, please, take it away.
Thank you to the Planning Commission. I appreciate the audience and I appreciate the time that you gave the staff to review, and we're happy to respond to the questions that the Planning Commission had. And I really want to thank Phil on behalf of the staff. He really made a big help to make sure that we were following protocol and make sure that we were, the Park and Rec Department doesn't do this fairly often in front of the Planning Commission, so we want to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, and make sure that we're addressing all the issues and make sure that we're responding appropriately to the Commission. So, and to be a little repetitive, but I want to make sure that it's clear that we respond to the Commission's concerns and questions, and also some from the public. But the template as requested is going to be exactly the same as it exists now. The 5 lines and 15 characters, the text will remain exactly the same. We did lower shrink the hours of operation in terms of knowing the impact to the neighborhood that could potentially exist, and wanted to make sure that we're continue to be good neighbors to the community. There was mention of the amount of messages per day, so we did cap that currently at 3 messages per day, and the time frame of being 60 to 90 seconds, which corresponds somewhat appropriately with the light that exists there on Eastman and Tamalpais. I did mention in my staff report that all these policies and procedures we're putting under review for 6 months if it's approved, and we'd be happy to receive feedback from the Planning Commission, Town Council, the community on any way that the sign operates, and happy to adjust through the Park and Rec Commission, the Planning Commission, making sure that we're responding to the community's concerns appropriately. With that, I believe those are and obviously, and I did speak to, you did see the letter from David Bracken, which was addressing the concerns of safety and structural integrity of the existing marquee. And so we're hoping that under his guidance that there is probably some better ways to attach the new marquee to the existing structure, that the way that the current one is attached to would be a little bit different, but it is structurally sound. And to his recommendation that the new marquee would be of no more distraction than the current one has to traffic or pedestrians or drivers. And with that, I'd be happy to try to address any questions or concerns and any more specifics that are requested from staff.
All right, well, thank you. I'll start with the other commissioners over to my left and ask Nicolo if he has any questions for you or for...
No, none at this
All
time.
right.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
I just have a question for Phil. We had asked last time about the notification, and I think last time it just went to folks who lived within the 300 feet. Did we end up posting it more broadly, like on Nextdoor or other,
Yes.
soliciting feedback elsewhere?
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, we did. A couple things that we did unique to this project is we notified everybody within 500 feet instead of 300 feet, so we went broader in that regard. We posted it on the website as a news flash, and we posted it on Nextdoor. And we posted it in the usual physical locations on the various boards, and we posted it on the reader board itself.
Okay.
Those were.
Thank you.
All right, is that it there, Jennifer?
That's it.
All right, Dr. Bundy.
No question.
It's too easy. All right, a couple of questions for you, sir. So when the sign goes off, it just becomes a white plastic, sign white plastic front, or what happens? What color does it go when it goes off?
It'll go black.
It'll go black.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Lightless, I suppose that's a better way to put it.
all right, so is that to be lighting white plastic that is over the lights, or it's a whole different makeup of plastics and so forth to accommodate the LEDs behind it?
I'm sorry.
So when you have LEDs, you put plastic in front of it, and so what are you using in front of the LEDs? Is that lighting white plastic, or it's another color, or do you know what it is that goes in front of
The
it?
lighting itself is white light from the LEDs. I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question. I apologize.
So then, the plastic is white, and then you...
No, I'm sorry. The lights are white. I'm sorry. Yeah, and so in terms of when it turns off, when we deactivate it, it physically turns off. The power is shut off, and so it goes black.
Okay. So the letters are made by programming the lights to be black. Is that how it's done?
Or the absence of light in those areas.
I got it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. That said, with the new hours that you've proposed, I wonder if it impacts either events that are scheduled to be early in the morning, and should it come on earlier, so that people know what's happening at 8 or 9 o'clock, like the dance classes or the church group or so forth. And then should the hours be commensurate or tied to solar to a solar clock. You know,
Certainly, yeah. We did take, I really did take into consideration the broad spectrum of events that we do have at the community center. We don't have a lot of early morning singular events. We do have normal operational events, jazzercise, and sort of in general meetings that exist at the community center. They do not currently utilize the marquee as it exists.
Right.
So we felt that it wasn't going to be a detriment to their operation. But in terms of trying to maximize the time where the events themselves exist at the community center, that's why we adjusted the times. But certainly, putting a we call it a graphic eye, whatever the term is for a light switch based on sunrise and sunsets could certainly be done as well.
sunlight sensor, yeah. So then if you have 3 messages up there per day, and one of them applies to a message, and this doesn't sound like it's written in stone, particularly about the number of messages, it's up to 3 messages.
Correct.
In that, say you get to 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock, and that event is passed, do you have a way of removing that by programming out of the sign notifications that go up on the sign?
Absolutely, yes. The programming for the sign is completely granular. So, in terms of what messages are up throughout the day and how many, they may be up to 3 messages, but they could certainly change with, as you described, the hours of those events themselves.
Will the fee for the use of the sign change?
The fees that are currently established were based on the ones that we currently established through the Park and Rec Commission, the Town Council, were based off having a new digital marquee.
Okay, so that is in place then?
Yes.
So, all
Ready to
right.
go if and when approved.
Okay, so I'm just going to recap and say then that I appreciate you taking it back to the simplistic approach, and that we'll review it then down the road and see if it needs to go or go further in elaborate colors or anything else. But right now, this is what it's going to be. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I will open it up to public comment at this point and see if anybody wants to step up to the microphone and make a comment on this.
Ted McKay again. I was seeing in the Pacific Sun for about 3 weeks in succession was a controversy about this LED sign, and that it would glare and it would kind of disturb people going along. And that possibly true or not, but I think LED is LED, and I see headlights coming at me LED, and sometimes they put colors on the lights, and it's still kind of a little bit glaring. And to have colored light or whatever they want to do to muffle the glare, I think it's not very sound without some, spoken opposition. I volunteer at the Bay Club, the Bay Model in Sausalito, and I enjoy it. It's so much fun. I'm at the desk at the visitor center, and I lead tours going through. But the most thing I look forward to, the most fun, is updating the large board they have. It's like a sign, like here. And I take out the numbers and the letters to have new events showing, and there's no religious messages, and there are no political messages, and there's no happy birthdays or, it's my anniversary today or something, wedding anniversary. So I would like to volunteer to myself, spend some time helping, because with computers, we're doing away with people's jobs, and that's caused so much political and social turmoil. And I think it's fun. People like to do things with their hands. The Bay Model itself was all done by hand back in the 50s, into the 60s and so on, and people come by that used to work on it, and they loved it. But now there's a computer, not the Bay Model anymore, except for visitors. But I went by Sunday. There's a church service, and I'm not sure it's a religion. It's kind of like a pseudo-religion maybe, but I still think, I thought there was separation of church and state. And why on town property, why do they have a religious group? And why are they advertising on this sign? And birthdays and wedding anniversaries, people could put signs all around or on their cars, toot their horn and balloons and happy birthday for me. So So I don't see why you have to change it every day, 3 times a day. My gosh, I mean, what is this sign for? It's supposed to be for events of the town of Corte Madera. So if you did what I think is appropriate, you change the sign once or twice a week or whatever. I changed the sign at Bay Model twice a month. It would be once a month, but then I update for the art gallery that's there. So I think you should rethink about it. I think maybe a vendor came by and said, hey, why don't you have a digital sign? Hey, why don't you sit on a computer instead of going up that ladder? But I would be volunteer my time if it's so much strenuous work for somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. All right, anyone else that would like to comment on this issue? Anyone else out there in the audience on this? All right, so then we will close the public comment section on this item and bring it back up here to the dais to talk about. So I'm just going to reiterate, unless Mario wants to address any of that, but I think that the idea is that it reduces labor and so forth for the town. And there's plenty of people like the idea of the small town character. I've put happy birthday messages myself up there. So in any case, anyway, Nicolo, what are your thoughts about this?
As far as the use, I like to leave it up to the maintenance and operations of the rec center to decide what's best for their use. And as far as the aesthetic, what they're proposing, I think it's good, and I'd like to concur with staff recommendations to adopt the resolution.
All right, thank you. Jennifer?
I would agree that I think you guys have done a good job addressing our initial comments and concerns. So I think that it's a fine proposal.
All right, thank you. Dr. Bundy?
I'd just like to comment that Corte Madera is blessed with a lot of volunteers to do a lot of things. And, Ted's volunteerism would be greatly appreciated, but I don't think Mario wants volunteers up on ladders trying to change the sign. And as I interpret everything that he has done and Phil has done in relationship to this, is to leave the look of the sign basically the same with no colored lights and just the black and white, old style marquee. In addition to labor saving, I think there's a safety issue in not having somebody going up and down that ladder to change that, every day. So I think Park and Rec and Mario have done a good job of retaining the original character of the sign, but making it, much easier to utilize, to change, that are going to benefit the citizens that put those signs up.
Thank you. I would concur with the findings and be able to approve this resolution. I think that everyone should understand that the level of illumination is going to be adjusted. Craig Love has donated a light meter to the town, and we all have some individual light meters. And we will be looking at the brightness of this and determining if it is it too light, what are the lumen levels that it is at, and at the time of day and so forth. So there'll be some experimentation. That's a necessary part of this. It will be adjusted to be acceptable, and that's how it will go. So with that said, do I hear a motion on this resolution?
I can make a motion to approve the design review and sign permit application number PL 20170022 DRC and PL 20170023 SP for installation of a new digital reader board sign at the Town of Corte Madera Community Center within the frame of the existing reader board sign at 498 Tamalpais Drive, APN 026-19119.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Boyle, would you call the roll on this one, please?
Commissioner Friedman,
Aye.
Commissioner Bundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Caldera,
Aye.
Commissioner Chase.
Aye. So with that said, we close out the sign ordinance, and Mario is free to go forward.
And just quickly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Are there appeal rights on this, Phil?
There are.
Okay,
Yes.
would you care to read those, please?
Sure will. The appeal rights are, an appeal may be filed by any action taken by the planning commission at a public hearing within 10 calendar days of this decision. Appeal forms are available at the planning department, town of Corte Madera. A $300 filing fee is required.
Thank you. All right, so item number 5A is the lot coverage zoning ordinance amendment. This is consideration of proposed zoning ordinance amendments to Chapter 18 of the Corte Madera Municipal Code regarding lot coverage in the R1 medium-density residential zone, including possible recommendations to the town council. We have discussed this twice at previous meetings, and I'll let Mr. Bush explain what we've been through and where we are today.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as you mentioned, we've had 2 study sessions or kind of preliminary public hearings on this to have kind of an open discussion, members of the public, interested parties, commissioners and staff, to discuss this idea of modifying the lot coverage standards, specifically in the R1 medium-density residential zone, which is the majority of single-family residential in town. The idea behind this was spurred by, well, for a number of reasons, but one, with the number of variance applications that have come before staff and come before the Planning Commission regarding lot coverage. So the Planning Commission requested that staff kind of explore this issue further, and staff has done some background research looking at neighboring jurisdictions, kind of looking at the purpose of lot coverage, and kind of with the input provided by public and the commission, and based on that background research, kind of come up with some proposals to modify this. So very little has changed from our previous discussions. So tonight, I won't rehash too much, but I can kind of outline the proposed changes, which I have on a couple slides here, and then happy to answer any questions. So let's see. Uh-oh. Off to a good start there. So again, for those of you in the audience or anyone who may not have attended and wants a little background, we've been over this, but lot coverage is, to put it very simply, we have these 2 figures here. It's looking at the footprint of all built structures on a lot. It takes into account every structure that's over 3 feet in height, so that can include a raised deck, portions of a garage, and the residence itself. So it's really just looking at that footprint. Lot coverage is one of a number of different standards for development in the R1 zone, including height, floor area ratio, which looks at the total square footage of the home beyond just the footprint, also the second story or third story as well, height, different other standards. So lot coverage is one of those. The first major change here that was discussed, the existing lot coverage ranges from 30% to 35%, the size of the lot. Staff has proposed increasing that to 40% for all lots that are greater than 4,500 square feet. There's 150 or so lots that are under that size, and in those situations, the revised ordinance would exempt those lots from lot coverage, leaving other standards to limit lot coverage. So I have a graphic that I'll show in just a moment here, but basically what that means that we've discussed previously in the study sessions was that lots of a certain size, when you look at the setbacks, the side setback, front and rear, it essentially already carves out a significant portion of the lot that would not be buildable. And so it leaves you with an effective lot coverage even if there is no actual lot coverage restriction. So just to go over this quickly, the change that was made is that for structures of greater than 4,500 parcels greater than 4,500 square feet, not more than 40% of the total site area shall be covered by structures. In addition to that, there may be an allowance of 2%, so up to 42% for particular built elements that would otherwise count toward lot coverage, including trellises, arbors, certain landscaping features that may otherwise count toward lot coverage but are seen to be less imposing and have less of effect on the aesthetics of the property. And so that has been spelled out here. In addition, as I mentioned, no lot coverage requirement would apply to lots less than 4,500 square feet, equal to or less than 4,500 square feet. And then there's the existing provision that allows some additional lot coverage, 2%, for a house that's raised in the floodplain above base flood elevation, acknowledging that oftentimes that requires raising stairs to get to a higher entrance into the home and potentially raising decks or other parts of the house to accommodate that action. In addition, the measurement of lot coverage has been revised simply to clarify. This doesn't change the method for measuring lot coverage. It doesn't change what is included in lot coverage or counted toward it. It was merely rewriting it to make it much more clear based on experience of staff and others in trying to make sense of it. So that's been included here as well for reference. Those changes fully encompass what's being proposed. Again, we had 2 study session hearings on this prior to this, which were noticed. This hearing was noticed in the newspaper as is required because it's a proposed zoning ordinance amendment. It was also put on the famous reader board sign and posted in multiple public locations and sent online to various newsletters and things like that as well. So tonight, what's being considered are these proposed amendments as shown in Exhibit A of Attachment 1. Passing the resolution would mean that the Planning Commission is recommending these changes to the Town Council, who would make the ultimate decision on it. And staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt this resolution and make that recommendation to Town Council to move forward with these proposed changes. So happy to answer any questions you have on it.
All right, thank you. It's a quick reiteration. Bob, I'll start with you. Do you have any further questions for staff about this proposal? I think it's pretty clear what we've seen before and where we are now.
No question.
No questions, right. Nicolo?
No questions.
Okay. Jennifer?
No questions.
All right, nor do I. So with that said, then we'll open it up to public comment about this item, lot coverage zoning ordinance amendment. So if you would like to comment on this change to the lot coverage for under 4,500 square feet, please step up to the microphone and make your comment. I don't see anyone standing up to the microphone.
Which lot number is it?
It is not a lot number. If you're going to speak or ask questions, please step up to the mic. No, okay. So that said, there is no one who is going to make a public comment on this town-wide ordinance.
And if I can just add,
Yeah.
there's an additional attachment that were, I think, 3 letters that were provided to staff supporting these changes as well. So those have been included in the record.
All right, so for the record, what happens with this is that we vote on it, and this then goes before the council, and there are 2 readings of it before council before it gets adopted. So there's more opportunity for public input, as well as the council may have something to say about some of this. So with that said, we have no public comment. Is there a motion on this from anyone here on the dais?
I can make a motion.
Please.
Motion to adopt the presented amendments to Chapter 18 of the Corte Madera Municipal Code regarding lot coverage in the R1 medium-density residential zone.
So our recommendation is to the council, and this is a vote of that recommendation. It's not a resolution per se, right?
Well, there is resolution number
is.
17,
17.
010.
010.
Excuse me.
And that
I-
resolution
I
would-
stand corrected then, yes. All right,
is what's under consideration.
so then we have a second on this resolution?
I second.
Okay, vote, please.
Commissioner Friedman,
Aye.
Commissioner Bundy, Commissioner Caldera,
Aye.
Commissioner Chase.
Aye. All right, so there we have it. We're through 2 items, and item number 5B is before us next. It is 706 Meadowsweet Drive. We're going to take a short break right now, and then we'll be back here no later than 8:15.
If I could just perhaps make a comment to the audience before we break. There are a number of items in the back table that I failed to mention, so there are letters regarding both the Budget Inn and 141 Crescent. So if you're interested in those, they're on the back table, and I will present those to the commission.
So let us show back on the record here, and we are now reviewing the application for 706 Meadowsweet Drive, known specifically as design review, conditional use permit, and sign permit for the renovation of all existing buildings, the addition of 4 guest rooms, and the creation of 23 parking spaces with pedestrian access and seating in associated landscaped areas at 706 Meadowsweet Drive. So, I'm going to let staff take this away. There's a lot of information here.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to start out. I'd like to formally introduce Sean Kennings. Sean Kennings is with LAK Associates. He's a planning consultant that we brought on to do this project actually way back in 2015 when we were flooded with projects just like we are today. And so Sean's been shepherding this for a while. It's been active and inactive, and now it's come to this point. So Sean's been doing a great job on this project. He's also, you'll probably see him in 2 weeks. He is doing he did the environmental work for Marin Montessori School on Paradise Drive, and that's coming before you in 2 weeks from today. So with that, welcome Sean, and he has a PowerPoint presentation, and go from there.
Thank you, Phil. Chair, members of the commission, again, hi, I'm Sean Kennings with LAK Associates, contract planner. As you said, this is a conditional use permit, design review, and sign permit for the existing Budget Inn to be rebranded as The Palms, as you've probably seen in your packet. The location 706 Meadowsweet. Meadowsweet is where the library is. Casa Buena Drive is actually where the project takes access from. We've got a dental office building here at 81 Casa Buena, and the urgent care facility, I think, at 101. You've got multifamily residential apartments here to the south, then Casa Buena Drive, Tamalpais, and the town center to the north. The property is about 23,000 square feet, basically a rectangle shape, slopes south to north. The existing project site has an FAR of 27%, and that's nominally, it's a 6,400 square foot FAR, but it's about 9,000 square feet, but that's because it has several unused garages on in both Building A and Building B. We'll show you that in a bit. And I think that's a throwback to when the structure was originally built in the mid-50s, and it was literally a motel. So the proposal is 34% FAR, which would be about 7,950 square feet. And that's the remodel and renovation of all 3 buildings. And it's, as you've probably seen in the plans, it is a remodel. They're proposing to tear out some walls with several walls remaining to reconfigure the structure in the existing footprint. And as it is now, there's a 20-foot rear and front yard setback. Both buildings A and B, or I think, parts of both building A and B are within that 20-foot setback. There would be about a 1.5 foot shift in Building A. Building A is the two-story structure to the east, but I believe it conforms to the side yard setbacks. The proposed height, the maximum height of the building, each building now has about a flat roof. Building A is a two-story building, Building B is one-story, and the manager's unit is a one-story building. Building A has an existing height now of 21 feet 5 inches. It's a proposed 27-foot 9-inch maximum height to a peaked roof, standing seam metal roof. The FAR, or the height, maximum height for this C3 zoning is 35 feet. So 27.9 would be the highest point on Building A. Building B, which is on the west side, existing is 12 feet 9 inches. And Building C, which is the manager's unit on the south side of the property, is 13 feet 8 inches. That would have a maximum height of 16.1. Building B would have a maximum height of 19.2. All three buildings would have a peaked roof with a standing seam metal construction. Currently, the parking is about 18 to 21 unstriped spaces or striped spaces, but it's not in any kind of sort of standard configuration. There's no ADA spaces. The proposal includes 23 striped spaces, including one ADA van accessible space, 7 compact spaces per the zoning ordinance, which allows for 30% compact. And then this project also has 6 modified spaces. On the plan, they're kind of indicated as hybrid spaces. I kind of sort of want to avoid that terminology just because that kind of harkens to some sort of like, electric vehicle. But these modified spaces essentially are the required width, 9 feet, but they don't meet the depth for standard spaces of 20 feet. They're about 3 inches short. And that's due to the current configuration of the parking area and what I'll sort of get to next, which is the flood wall for Building A. And so that prevents sort of the parking aisle and the parking width to be the maximum, to be the standard as required by the code. And so staff has reviewed that and determined that those 6 modified spaces meet the intent of the standard space and thus allow conformance with the code, so 7 compact out of the 23 total. Real quick, the project is exempt per CEQA, Section 15302B, which is the replacement or reconstruction of existing structures. We looked at a secondary exemption, which is actually in the resolution, which would have been modification to existing commercial structures less than 10,000 square feet. But either way, the project is exempt from CEQA based on the 2 exemptions. But we went with 15302B, which is replacement or reconstruction of a commercial structure in the same size and purpose. One of the issues with this particular structure, particular project, is the FEMA floodproofing. Per FEMA, it's in a zone, the AE zone, which is a 1% annual chance of flood, which is the 100-year storm. And per FEMA, the base flood elevation or where it would flood in that 100-year storm is 10 feet, NAVD 88, which is the elevation at which point your project would get inundated with water. Corte Madera Municipal Code includes a 1-foot addition to that. So typically for a new project, you'd have to meet that flood requirement of 11 feet base flood elevation. Because it's a C3 zone, it's a commercial structure, you have options to floodproofing. So typically you would raise the structure to meet that base flood elevation. Because it's a commercial structure, you're not required to raise it. You can do a multitude of things, one of which is dry flood proofing, the other is wet flood proofing. So Building A, which is on a slab, is proposing a 5-foot high flood wall around the pedestrian access to the ground floor. This flood wall would include sort of flood doors that when closed are sealed so that water obviously would not get in. This requirement also includes a 4-foot high flood proofing around all walls of Building A. And essentially, it's like a membrane in construction that meets the FEMA requirement and the town code for floodproofing. Buildings B and C are not on slabs. They have crawl spaces because they also don't meet the 11-foot base flood elevation. They're proposing what's called wet flood proofing, which is essentially a flood vent, which means that the building gets flooded, and then the water passes through the building and out the other side. And that's, and I guess that's an acknowledgement that the guest rooms would get flooded then. And again, because it's a commercial structure, this is allowed per the code. And I'll show you sort of where the locations are as proposed. And I believe the applicant has brought their consultant here tonight to speak to the floodproofing requirements. And Phil and I today talked to David Keene here at the town of Corte Madera, and he acknowledged that part of the conditions of approval of this project would be that the applicant has to meet those FEMA flood requirements per FEMA and per the town code. And again, if they can't meet one consideration of like dry flood proofing, which would be active or passive flood door, or excuse me, if they can't meet the wet flood proofing, which is the flood vent, then they'd have to include some sort of dry flood proofing, which would be the active doors, which means somebody actually has to go and put the door in and close it, or a passive, which is what this flood wall is, which is incorporated into the structure. This is the current layout of the project site. Again, I've been speaking to Building A. This is the two-story structure. Building B is the one-story structure on the west, and then Building C is the four-room manager's apartment. It's got a sort of a combination bedroom, office, and sort of kitchen, living room. Building A has laundry and like a common area, plus the unused garages on the bottom floor. Building B has 8 units currently, and I think 4 garages. Again, these would be modified to have all rooms or common areas. The setback, I guess it's not on this plan. I'll show you where the existing setbacks are. And again, it's kind of a funny arrangement of their existing parking. Some spaces are striped, some spaces are not, and no ADA. Here's the current photos of the site. Again, access off Casa Buena. Building A with the 2-story building. Building B, 1-story, you can see these are the original garages. I would say all buildings are in somewhat state of disrepair. This is the proposed site plan. Here's the setback here, front yard setback. You can see Building B is in the front yard setback. Here's the rear yard setback. You can see just a piece of Building A and a piece of the Building C are in the setback. Building A would include new stairwells here and at the north end. This is the flood wall area. So I believe it's a 4-foot wide internal walkway, and then this would be the flood wall. And it has doors at the various locations. Again, those act as the sort of a bathtub effect. This would include a common area, a laundry area, a business center, and then I believe 4 units on the ground floor. And this unit here would be accessible. Building B would include, I believe it's 12 units. 10 units, excuse me. And 1 accessible unit here. This would include ADA ramping here, removal of sort of these individual front porches of each of the existing rooms and creating 1 accessible walkway. Again, there's no flood wall on this unit because it's where the existing sort of finished floor of this structure, that passageway will access the rooms instead of raising it up another 2 feet. We have bicycle parking here at the manager's unit, ADA ramp into the manager's unit, access off Casa Buena Drive. Here are your standard spaces. Here are your compact spaces. There's 2 compact spaces now here. Here's your ADA space. And these are your 6 sort of modified spaces. And again, they are 9 feet wide, but 19 feet 9 inches long, so just a few inches short of the requirement. I'll go through the elevations. Oh, yeah. Slide is a little funny. So this is the existing elevation looking east of Building A. Here you have garages on the ground floor. You have sort of common rooms down here. This would be the proposed elevation. This is the flood wall here. You have a new staircase here, a new staircase there. This would be the accessible unit. Common rooms here. A couple of units on the ground floor and the majority of units upstairs. Standing seam metal roof. And as you've seen in their sort of color array, I'll get to in a sec, they have these kind of cement board mosaics at certain points in the structure. This is the rear of Building A. Again, this sort of mosaic design that they're proposing. You'll see a note on your plans that talks about the flood proofing. I think the mosaics are supposed to be 5 feet high, but the flood proofing would only be 4 feet high. And again, after conversations with David King, these windows here would be required to meet that flood standard. So they would either have to be inoperable, closed windows, so preventing water from getting in, or they would have to pull them up to a distance to meet the flood requirement. Building B elevations, again, flat roof replaced with a peaked roof, metal railing out front with an ADA accessible walkway running along replacing these sort of individual stoops. It's the rear of Building B. Instead of mosaics, they have sort of a painted color stucco, so it'd be sort of a dark blue and then a gray, dark blue, gray. Here's the proposed elevations of the manager's unit. Again, mostly just additions to the peaked roof, standing seam metal. There's a ramp for the access the manager's office. This would be the manager's unit rear access for the apartment. And so here's sort of the color illustrations of the project. And as you'll note, and I'll get to it in a second, the applicant has presented their original application with sort of this blue color scheme. And it includes these cement board mosaics here, wood sort of paneling accents, metal railings. Here's that rear elevation of Building B looking east. And here's your sort of signature palms feature. Here's your south elevation looking from Meadowsweet at the manager's unit and the seating areas. And this would be, again, here's your cement board mosaic, and this would be looking west. This is your trash enclosure adjacent to Meadowsweet. It's an updated landscaping plan, which includes proposing 19 new trees. There is one tree removal, which is a pine variety here, which would be required to remove because it's adjacent to sort of the existing foundation. This is the part of the Building A that will be bumped out about 1.5 feet. The application includes these 4 Washingtonian palms. There's a Washingtonian palm here in the corner. I believe it's 5 Canary Island pines, 6 London plane trees, and I believe 4 Japanese maples. Existing landscaping to remain here at the manager's unit. It also includes sort of bougainvillea, creeping vines, and then ceanothus planting throughout. Landscaping plan also includes, as proposed, pervious pavers in the parking area and pervious pavers behind Building B, and then again in this area, in the seating area. Here's your trash enclosure. There are like low walls, pedestrian paths, seating here and seating here. Again, bike storage here. The proposed sign would go from a location right about here to right about there. And staff would note that the landscaping plan, including the drainage plan and stormwater pollution plan, would all have to be approved by the code during the building permit phase. So any sort of pervious paving or any sort of drainage would have to require to be, get their NPDES permit and their stormwater pollution control permit. Here's a couple images of the site as proposed. Here's your seating area to the west of the manager's unit, seating area to the east, bicycle parking, access to the manager's unit. Sort of typical detail. This is your flood wall here, sort of decorative elements. This would be a flood door, parking, access, decorative wood elements, mosaic siding. There's your flood wall again. And so the flood wall again that's the dry-proof flood-proofing element. So it effectively creates a bathtub out of the building up to a certain height to meet the FEMA requirement. Whereas this building here, building B, would have flood vents. I think they're required to be 1 foot off grade, and they effectively flood the unit. So in event that a flood, those units would be damaged in that sense, but the building itself would not be knocked over. And I think that's where the main requirement for these flood vents, and that's how the building department looks at it. So again, the applicant had proposed a color scheme that's this sort of blue and aqua colors. Staff pointed out that sort of incongruous with surrounding structures. They hired a colorist to come up with alternate themes. So as proposed, they had it as option 3. I know that the directional finding in the application was off, so this is correct here. But if you're driving along Casa Buena, sorry about that. If you're driving along Casa Buena east, this would be your view towards the hotel. This is looking from the apartments to the south, looking north. This would be going west on Meadowsweet. And again, here would be your sort of primary access off Casa Buena. So this is the blue color scheme, as we're calling it. Alternate color scheme 1 is a gray theme, but it includes the cement siding, cement board mosaics as similar to the blue theme. And then option 2 is just a sort of plain gray, if you will, color scheme. And staff would note that this is most consistent with surrounding buildings in the area, and it sort of presents the least sort of busy color scheme. The application also includes a sign permit, which includes, as I mentioned, the rebranding of the budget into the Palms. And as you can see, they've got sort of an orange background with a yellow sun, black palm tree, and white The Palms writing. The wall sign is about 5 feet by 6 feet. It's here on building A, underneath the second floor window. The proposed sign, you'll note in your packet, there's a template that they got from their sign manufacturer. So on the left-hand side of your sheet, you'll see it looks kind of blocky. That was what they got from the sign manufacturer, sort of a template. But this is what they're sort of proposing, which would meet the sort of sign guidelines at 15 feet tall. It is two-sided. They would have LED lighting. It's 2 feet wide here. It's about 10 feet wide by 5 feet high. Staff would also comment that the color scheme for the sign, whatever the choice of color scheme after the public hearing, staff would note that the sign should match the building. As you can see, it's sort of more specific to this blue color scheme, even though it's got kind of an aqua background. So as you're looking at the project, staff says that you make the findings for the conditional use permit. There are 3 findings. There's the findings for the design review aspect of the remodel. I believe there's 8 findings. And then there are several findings for the sign permit. So with that, staff would conclude that ask the commission to hold a public hearing and make the findings for conditional use permit, design review, and sign permit. And staff's recommendation that you would choose option 2, which is the gray color scheme. And with that, I'll conclude.
And if I could just add, I failed to mention, I put a number of 2 sheets at your places, emails that were received today. One from Ms. Metcalf as a citizen, and she's also a planning commissioner, as you all know, for the record. And second is another email from a resident regarding expressing their opinion of the budget in. And again, for the public, these 2 items are in the back at your places. As Sean mentioned, Mr. Gary Hall, who's the flood control person, the engineer who worked on the project, is present here, as well as the architect, Mr. Mora. I'm not sure if the, and also the colorist is here. I'm not sure if the owner is here or not. Owners as well. Okay, so those numerous people from the applicant are here to represent the project. And that concludes our report.
All right, well, thank you very much for that introduction to this project. Before we get to the applicant or whoever will make the proposal to us, the pitch, I want to ask the other commissioners if they have any preliminary questions of staff at this time before we hear from the applicant. Nicolo.
I do. I have a question, maybe now or maybe to the architect. Would it be possible, I think it's very important for then to be able to talk about this project, to define each on the 3 buildings, if you're able to quantify in relationship to the envelope, to the existing envelope of each of the 3 buildings, how much demolition it's proposed and how much, obviously will be kept on the envelope, on the each, building.
So,
I think that would be a good question for the applicant.
Okay.
I did some initial looking at it, and there's certainly a significant amount of the structure that will be modified and removed. But I think the architect could probably speak to that better than staff at this point.
anything else you want to put on the staff to answer? Because we will pepper the applicant with questions.
Yeah, sure. No.
Okay.
No, thank you.
All right. Jennifer, any questions for the staff?
I don't have any questions
All
for
right.
staff. Thank you.
Dr. Bundy?
No.
All right. Just a couple of questions that will probably come out also with the applicant. But first off, with regard to setbacks that are currently running through the front and the back of the property, and they go through the buildings. So given that they run through an existing building, is the reason that we're not addressing them in the rebuilt version is because they're existing setbacks with existing non-conforming buildings? Or we're not asking for a variance on those setbacks in any way? Is that because of that reason?
Yes, yeah, they're considering existing non-conforming structures.
Such that if it was decided that this was a rebuild, then they would have to ask for a variance for those setbacks to be
Yes,
intruded upon.
if the structures were demolished,
Right.
and then they would need to, they have two options. They would need to they would need to apply to put the buildings in the setback, and they would be asking for variances.
Okay. All right, so they have a big troop here, and we have lots of questions for the individuals that come to present tonight. So let's get right to it. Who's going to start and present the project initially for the applicant? And then if you would, sir, please identify yourself and who else you have with you so we know what we've got. Time?
Good evening.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're going to give you 20 minutes on this.
And I do have plans, but we can display on the screen if you want to see any different sheets.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, members of the commission, members of the planning department. My name is Patrick Mora, architect. I am representing Marine Hotels, the owners present here tonight. And we have been working on this project for the past 2.5 to 3 years. And of course, we found there were many things that needed to be resolved. The main items that we found were the flood control, and that came about from FEMA requirements. The other one was the parking. We tried to do our best to accommodate the cars with the sizes required by the town and with the ADA, all the ADA facilities and parking required. We also had the thinking about the shape of the buildings and to provide a roof that would be adequate and at the height within the limits. Another problem that we have, which is a big one, and this answers the questions of Commissioner Caldera, is the volume of Building A was changed. The footprint of Building A was changed to be able to expand the parking widthwise and to allow the floor wall to go in front of that walk. So Building A used to be wider. And we reduced the building by approximately 1,140 square feet. And but the back of Building A was bumped out in the middle, about 1.5 feet, to compensate and to be able to have the spaces inside still working because they were a little bit too small. So Building A, the footprint of Building A is the only one that changed, and it was due to the fact that we needed to accommodate the wall in front and to make the parking. The best we could do with the parking layout is to provide the spaces, but we were missing 3 inches on one side, and therefore the spaces that you see labeled as HS are the modified spaces that are missing the 3 inches. But they comply with the width, which is 9 feet. The rest of the spaces are okay. The compacts are, I think we comply fully. If you consider the modified spaces fine, then we comply fully with the requirements of the code to have the compacts and standard amounts as they are. In reducing the area of Building A, we also comply with the FAR, the floor area ratio. We came just exactly at the 0.34% of the site. Another problems that we work with were the colors. We had this color scheme that will try to bring some variety to the site and to identify the stairs in a way. When you look at the elevation of Building A from the parking lot, you see that there's what's shown called a mosaic type of work right there. That identifies the stairs. Those are sort of niches where the stairs are located. These 2 stairs are new, by the way. The old stair on top is set back and it was inadequate. You need 2 means of egress per code. So we put the new one at the end, and these are decorated with these color panels and some wood. And the railing is metal, and we have the floor wall in front at the base, which is concrete with some wood slats also. All these surrounded by the greenery, we felt that will do a lot for the site. Right before this meeting on Friday, I did some canvassing of the neighborhood to try to reach out to the neighbors, the dentist next door, the medical offices, the coffee shop, the gas station, and the apartment buildings in the back. And I invited them to come, give us support, and they all were very happy that we are doing something to these buildings, because right now they are in disrepair. I think Sean has covered all the items very well, and I'll be open for questions.
So, thank you. Who is with you tonight as a part of your team? Would you just reiterate who's here to answer questions and for what reason?
Mr. Sam Devdara, the owner, is here. He can talk about anything about the management of the building.
Okay.
Gary Hall, the engineer for the flow control.
Uh-huh.
And Bob Bachter, the colorist.
Okay.
Right, the landscape architect couldn't make it tonight, but we can answer those questions too. Yeah.
All right. So before we get into specific questions from the commissioners, back to Nicolo's question as to what percentage of these buildings, Building A in particular, is being demolished or torn down. You know, as I look at the plan, I see the dotted lines and I see the solid lines, and if we ran the calculation, what would you come up with as a percentage of the building that remains versus the percentage of the building that is being torn down?
The sheet A 0.1 has, if you look at the table at the bottom of the sheet, right-hand side, has the existing Building A, existing square footage, 5,534. And the proposed square footage is 4,430. There's a difference of, I think, 1,130. That is a reduction of the square footage of the only building that is being reduced.
But it doesn't tell us what is being torn down to build what you have on plan. So there's you have a structure there, and you're going to tear that down, and how much of that is being torn down? Is it 60%, 70%, 80%, 100%? How much of that building is being torn down to make the new design? Do you have any
I'd say
idea?
about 25-30%. There's a sheet here that I'm going to guide you to that shows is sheet A6.
Yes.
And you might get an idea from the dash lines on sheet A6 on Building A. The walls are with hatching are the ones that are being removed. And that amounts to about 25%.
All right, I may check you up on that. But that said, while we are not in the business of structural review, it is our purview to look at whether something is a substantial rebuild or simply a remodel and so forth. So what you've indicated here is that the existing structural concrete and everything that's there in the ground is going to support or allow you to build a remodeled structure on top. So your engineer has to attest to that rather than saying that we're demolishing so much of that concrete that we really are building a new concrete slab. So there's a big difference in the type of project it is as a rebuild or a remodel. And I'm going to ask, and maybe the other commissioners will weigh in on this, that there be a letter that says, addresses this issue specifically. because if it's a rebuild, because you're taking those slabs out, that puts it into a different classification. The staff will have to tell us if, where a rebuild falls within the definitions of the CEQA and so forth, but we'll get to that later, I think. But that's a question that's pertinent here, given the amount of change there is to the footprint and whether or not that footprint is really a rebuild rather than a remodel.
I think I can answer part of that question.
Good.
Let me attempt to do that. If you look at the drawing A6 again, you can see that the building is narrow and long. And the joists are running, the floor joists. There's a concrete slab, and the rest of the frame up on top is wood. So the floor joists are running from back to the front. The wall in the front and the wall in the back are the ones that are supporting actually the building now, the second floor and the roof. So by cutting the front, or facing the parking lot, by cutting the front by approximately 4 to 5 feet, we're just trimming the joists, and the rest of the joists will remain in place. But there will be, the load will be transferred to the new wall inside. So the slab is in place, the concrete slab remains in place, there's no change. There will be a new wall supporting the section that is being cut.
Got it, okay.
That is the only change.
I understand what you're saying. So, okay, we won't belabor that point, and we'll come back to it in as succinct a manner as possible. I'll go back to you, Nicolo. Do you have any further questions for this gentleman before we ask some of his fellow members any questions?
No, I'm satisfied. That's what I was looking
Thank
for.
you.
Okay, great. Jennifer?
I just have a question about the ADA units. So it looks to me like one of the units is on the second floor, which is unit 13. And I didn't see anywhere, is there a lift or there's no elevator, right? So
No.
how can that work, that can be one of the ADA units when it's not accessible from the ground floor?
The percentage of disabled people, according to the latest codes, is on a wheelchair. Percentage of people on wheelchair that are disabled is about less than 10%. So the majority of people that are disabled have all the disabilities. They have problems walking, they have age problems, they have movement, all kinds. They have problems with their eyes or their ears or something else, and that's one thing. And the other one is that we felt that, and we do this in many buildings, we felt that if you provide a service or a facility on one floor, it's adequate to provide the same thing on the upper floor.
Got it.
And
Okay.
also in terms of stacking the plumbing and everything works out very well
So it
that way.
meets the code
Right.
for ADA
Yeah.
percentage, okay. And then, I don't know, are you the right person to ask about questions on the signage?
Signage, yes.
Okay. So, can you just explain, or just clarify, I guess, the sign? I don't know if we have the plan, that sheet that we could pull up, but, do you have that pointer? So, is it 16 feet from the very top of this feature to the ground?
It's 15 feet to the top of the sign.
15 feet to here, and then another foot here, correct? Okay, so it's 16 feet.
That's sort of like a cover, a decorative cover.
Okay, but it's
The sign.
16 feet.
Right.
Okay, and then is it lit in any way?
Yes.
And can you explain how it's lit?
It's lit through, we have a drawing, a technical drawing on sheet SG1, that has a small detail on the left.
I guess, I mean, is it, the letters are like backlit or,
It's backlit,
okay,
yes. Internally backlit on both sides,
okay.
yes.
And right now, the signage that you guys have is not lit, correct?
No, it's not.
I don't think.
It's not
Okay.
lit, no.
And what's the height of the current sign? I know this is somewhere in the report. I lost it though.
Slow.
It's about the same height.
I think it's low. I know it's lower, but I don't remember what by what. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you remember, Phil? Or sorry.
You can look at
The
the
question
photo.
is the height of the existing sign?
Yeah.
I don't, do you know, Sean?
You can look at the photo on the,
Just based on the photos, it's an approximation of about 12,
yeah.
12 feet,
12
12 to
feet.
15.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. So it's an increase of like 4 feet. Okay. Okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
Thank you.
All right, you reserve that right to come back to you. Dr. Bundy?
Yeah, I have a lot of concerns in regard to the building in the flood zone and really public safety. And because these are not just commercial buildings, but inhabited commercial buildings that are inhabited, potentially 24/7. In looking at Building B, the one-story building, and the issue of trying to find adequate parking for everybody, it would seem like a good solution would be to raise that building up and park underneath it. That way, the inhabitable space would be out of the flood zone. You would have created more safer, easier-to-use parking, wouldn't have needed, these modified and such, and would solve that issue of parking as well as the FEMA flood zone on that particular building.
Perhaps I can address the question to Gary Hall, the engineer. I believe we are taking measures to protect the building and the people that stay there, and raising the building would be very expensive.
Well, let me just ask then, since that wasn't a thought, is it a perimeter foundation on Building B, the one-story building? Is that how that is, or is it on sort of pier and post?
It's a perimeter foundation.
Perimeter, well, no, this
Foundation.
is the Building B,
Footing.
the one-story building.
There's a footing and there's a wood frame floor. A continuous footing all around the building or around the the
Perimeter
footprint.
foundation, a
Right.
continuous perimeter foundation. And the level of the floor, the threshold for that building, what is that?
Is about 18 to 20 inches above grade.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I'll have some questions for the flood engineer. And I also wanted to follow up on the signage, and this may be a question really for the owner also, but what is the value of a standalone lighted sign, for a motel that really isn't visible from Highway 101? I would think that most people are, already booked in advance. They're not just driving down the road looking for a motel sign. And I think that really sort of dates this in a certain area, even with the remodel, to have that freestanding sign there. What is the benefit of it? I would think the greater benefit to the traveling public that were using the newly renovated motel would be to have the address on Casa Buena, so that when they plug in their GPS to get there, they end up on Casa Buena at the entrance and not behind it at Meadowsweet. And so I can follow up with that, the owner can address that. I would prefer more of a, what's typically being done now, more of a monument sign at the entrance with some signage, potentially on the end of the buildings as you've proposed. I think that would create a sort of less dated style to everything.
Any questions for this gentleman further, Bob, before we get the flood guy up and talk to him?
No.
Okay. So maybe I think that's what we should do, is bring your flood consultant engineer up, and we ask him some questions about this system.
Sure.
So that would be
Sure.
good.
Gary?
So I just want to point out that I believe Mr. Hall would would prefer to speak from his chair, so we can bring the microphone to
Sure.
him.
Yeah.
And he also mentioned he does have a PowerPoint. I don't know if that's necessary, but perhaps you can,
Sure,
decide.
let's,
I think I would like to see that.
let's load it up then.
The camera may be able to follow you as well. And you want a relative time limit, Peter?
Yeah, we'll give him 5 minutes here if that's possible, 5 to 10.
Is this on?
No. Can hear. Okay, we just came.
There you go.
No, hopefully not.
Is that better?
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to just give you an overview or answer your questions?
Well, so you've got a PowerPoint. I don't know how long that is. What does a PowerPoint do?
Well, don't go to the PowerPoint because we've had enough PowerPoints. You guys have it. You can look through it. It's self-explanatory. Talks about FEMA, the difference between wet and dry flood proofing in general. It's not specific to this project. But there is a big difference between wet and dry flood proofing and what's allowed. And as we all know, FEMA is a four-letter word that starts with F. And about 6 years ago, they got into this game by not insuring anybody's properties. So if you want to build in a floodplain, you have to go through FEMA's game. And they have 10 manuals, bulletins on flood proofing. They have 11. 10 are on flood proofing. The 11th one is how to use first 10. So when the applicant came to me, because he was in a floodplain and he wanted to do a remodel. So FEMA allows you to build and or remodel in floodplains with their authorization. Sean did a very good presentation of the different issues. And we'll start with the dry flood proofing on the one side that's on slab. And while that wall is 5 feet high, that's if you measured it with a tape. Its MSL, mean sea level, is actually 10 feet real elevation, because that's the BFE. So all of Corte Madera has a 9+1. Anybody under 9 is in a floodplain. There's houses, there's other buildings, there's things like that. And so you cannot get insurance through your insurance agents if you're in a floodplain and FEMA hasn't endorsed that you've done some kind of corrective actions. So the slab side needed dry flood proofing, and the other building, the single-story building that we referred to, does have a continuous foundation, raised foundation, with existing ventilation vents in it. And as Patrick referred to, it's 18 inches to 30 inches. I went under there and took a look. So, as shown on the plans, with some modifications to the drainage swale on the back side of that building to improve drainage from the property and reduce the flooding. Over there. So we can use what's called flood vents, and I think it's Mr. Bundy was referring to that. All they do is let water into the crawl space and let water out, and they do need to be located 12 inches above grade. What that does is it equalizes a hydrostatic pressure on the foundation, so the foundation does not move and the building doesn't collapse. So there's less potential of a major catastrophic failure by equalizing the hydrostatic pressure on the foundation. That's wet flood proofing. So they have a combination, and of dry flood proofing is only allowed on commercial and non-residential buildings. And to answer one of your other questions that I've heard kind of bantered about, is a post-construction survey needs to be done, and it needs to be verified that everything is to elevation for the flood. And then a flood-proofing certificate needs to be applied for with FEMA, which has to include an EAP, which an emergency action plan should there be a flood for the dry flood proofing. Who's going to go shut the doors? Who's going to put the flood barriers where they need to be to make sure the water doesn't reach the building? The EAP has to be on file with you folks and a designated facilities manager at the hotel who is knowledgeable about how to implement the EAP for dry flood proofing. So that's just a process in getting this all approved and permitted. And I don't know if that answers your questions, but I'm done.
Well, we'll find out if it answers the questions.
Okay.
So, before I let Mr. Bundy is also a member of the Flood Control Board, go at it, and he'll have the most serious questions, or maybe not. I want to ask Nicolo and Jennifer if they have any questions of this gentleman based on
No,
what he's just
thank you.
stated.
I don't
Very
think
clear.
And maybe this will come up, but how often is this used? If we got one in Corte Madera, anywhere else in town, to your knowledge, or in the Ross Valley, where there is this dry flood wall around a commercial or non-residential building, is that in existence? You know, is it something that is relied upon, or is this just
Oh, it's implemented in many
dreamed-up
locations.
protection?
The more active passive dry flood proofing is where you store portable walls. I think here in town, the Mini Cooper place has something like that because he's in a floodplain and he has to run out and put all these muscle walls around the property when a flood's coming to keep the water out of it. So I think you actually have a program implemented in town. When I was researching it 2 years ago.
All right.
And Sean, I think we need to look into on the existing plans. When I was involved with this project 2 years ago, the surveyor listed the BFE as 9 feet. And so I was 9 plus 1, which is 10. I've seen some references to 10 feet, so 10 plus 1 is 11.
Right.
But the firm map with the elevation certificate, when these folks started this project, the firm map said it was 9 feet, not 10.
All right.
So
And
little clarification there, and
the wall is designed to go to 11 feet then,
10.
10. And why 10 when the town code calls for 11-foot protection?
Because on the firm map that's in the documents, it says 9. So I designed to 9 plus 1 is 10. That was 2 years ago.
Okay, and you've not been involved since?
No.
I see. Okay. That said, Dr. Bundy.
Yeah, Gary, I think what's happened is FEMA redid their flood map for Corte
kidding.
Madera in the last year and a half, and went to base flood 10 plus 1 freeboard. And so what we've required of homes, residential homes in the floodplain with substantial rebuild, such as the motel, is to get the threshold to base flood 11 to 11. And in looking at, I'm having a hard time understanding the building A from the standpoint that it sounds like its threshold is about 8, 8.5, or 9. The threshold for building A for the floor level.
I'd have to look at the draw. I'm not recalling off the top of my head. Okay, so I'd say it is.
And so your proposal is to replace the existing vents with the safety vents.
Yes.
Okay, but if we have the flood, at 11, which FEMA wants us to protect to, you know, the buildings and the contents the first couple feet will be ruined and have to be extensively redone. Is that correct?
There's some areas on that building where even the 11 doesn't get to the first floor elevation. And that's what, as you know, because look at the elevation certificate that a gentleman provided, and you look at the first floor elevation, and if that's above the BFE, the water will never get into it. The +1 and this 10 may change that.
Yeah, so we're requiring, residential and many of the commercial properties that have come before us are going to 11 for the first floor so that they won't risk in the unlikely event of flooding. We have had flooding in this area in the past. Since then, between Public Works and the maintenance of the levees or plans to maintain the levees, we hope this is not going to recur. But in the unlikely event of a 500-year storm and pump failure or breach of the levee, this area could see flooding again. And I would want the residents, the occupants that are staying at the motel to at least not be subject to flooding, since we're doing a new building, or basically doing a major makeover of this. I would think that at least Building A should be raised up, Building B should be raised up to 11 with appropriate ramps and such, so that you don't have this. You still have to put the safety vents in, but the issue of flooding is really significantly mitigated and is unlikely to occur to the occupants of the building.
Thank you. Well, as you know, and this comes back to the owner and his architect and FEMA will give you the option on that building to still put in the flood vents and put flood barriers on each door. That would have to be implemented with the EAP. And the flood barriers are a way of dry-proofing the entryways into the structure itself, such as the doorway. The windows are all above 11 feet. I know that from my memory, and I thought we had potential flood. And as you know, flood barriers are just a simple piece of fiberglass, the size of the door, that slips into a rail in the event of a flood. And that's on that PowerPoint also, if you guys want to take a look at that. So there's all kinds of options open to these folks that will pass muster with FEMA and the insurance companies. It's up to them to choose which ones they want to implement. But raising the building is one of them. But there are, I guess, more cost-effective and feasible options.
But there's no proposal here to dry-proof that building, which you would have to dry-proof the floor from underneath somehow, as well as the envelope of the building up to BFE 11. And that hasn't been proposed, as I understand it.
Well, a foot change in the last year is, I accept that, but it needs to be looked at again, just like that wall's going to have to be extended to meet this 11, if that's what you're going to hold this project to. So, but they're all solvable.
Mm-hmm. The issue with the unit manager's building too, that has a heightened space. I would think that that should be raised up to BF 11 because it's at 10.5 now. So I would want to see that raised up to 11 as part of this project. And I'm really questioning the concept of this flood wall and dry-proofing a building that's inhabited by individuals, and you're dependent on some manager or somebody to make sure that these doors are all in good working order and closed in what could potentially be a sudden flood situation, as opposed to something that really had significant warning for.
I understand that's part of the EAP, and it's part of the flood-proofing PowerPoint that you folks can look through tomorrow or at your leisure and discuss it with the owner and his architect, because technically, as far as FEMA goes, they're complying. Now, what the council here thinks and your opinions are up for negotiation, but they will be in compliance with FEMA.
when it's revised.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so
Yeah,
Phil,
I
I
think-
want to ask you then where we go with this, since it's a point of completeness, really, or level of addressing the issue in the plans, right?
Well, a couple things in my experience with dealing with FEMA and flood control. Just two items. In terms of this proposal to build a wall and then have gates that come down by residents or managers, that currently exists actually at San Anselmo Town Hall, when I worked for San Anselmo. So there is a flood wall around the town hall of the town of San Anselmo. And then when the bell rings, the public works folks go out there and put the gates down and protect town hall from getting flooded, similar to what they're proposing. Also, majority of commercial structures in downtown San Anselmo have these floodgates. And lastly, Restoration Hardware, project coming to you in the future, is proposing similar floodgates. So you'll see
Okay.
these again. So my understanding of this proposal and talking with Public Works is they are not proposing to meet the FEMA requirements or the town requirements in terms of elevating either structure. Neither structure is being moved up. Raise a hand if I'm wrong. So no, the finished floor of both these buildings will be the same when this is done as it is today. How they are proposing to meet FEMA and town requirements for Building A is to allow, for Building B, the one-story building, is to allow water to flush right through. And so the carpet's going to get destroyed, the inside of the units are going to get destroyed, but the structure itself will not collapse because the hydrostatic pressure will not be there. If water wasn't allowed to flow in and out, you'd have a box. That box would be crushed by the force of the water around it. So that's how Building B is meeting the requirements, and I believe that's how Building C, the manager's unit, as well. Because these are commercial buildings, even though there's people living in them and sleeping in them, we may think they're residential, but they're commercial, they can meet FEMA and the town requirements by doing that for B and C. For A, they're putting the wall around it. And they're putting the wall around the west elevation, and they're flood-proofing the walls of the first 5 feet, or first 4 feet or so of the back of Building A. So the commission may wish for their flood-proofing to be something different, but I'm not sure if the town has the ability to require them to meet FEMA and town's requirements in another way.
Right, so that said, the information on the plans is not current with what the FEMA code is for the town of Corte Madera, right? And,
But you can condition the project,
Okay,
and you
wait.
can still move forward and condition the project to be FEMA compliant
FEMA
and town compliant with
Right.
respect to flooding.
all right. Dr. Bundy, you thought you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to add too, there is a condition from Public Works that requires them to meet this FEMA standard, whether it's for floodproofing, dry or wet, or the finished floor elevation. So once they submit their building permits, they have to show that compliance, whether it's through dry floodproofing or wet floodproofing. As Phil explained, it's however it works
Okay.
with regards to FEMA.
So Phil and Gary may have a comment on this. My understanding of the use of the safety vents or flood vents is for when you have raised your house up and you have this base flood 11, but the hydrostatic pressures could potentially crush a perimeter foundation unless you had the ability to have water flush through. And that's the purpose of the safety vents, as I understand it. And here we have a situation where, well, yeah, the foundation will be okay, but you're still flooding, the maybe potential first floor of, or first couple of feet of the motel occupancy rooms. My understanding also of the flood walls that go in, primarily those go in for existing buildings that, you're trying to protect, but it's historical or beyond the ability to really take on a major renovation to raise the building or do something else. You're protecting an existing building. In San Anselmo, they also have warning in relationship to floods because their flood issue comes from Corte Madera Creek. Here, this flood issue could be that 500-year storm, pump failure, or breach of a levee.
Okay, well, I think we've sort of beat the flood issue to a point here that we can move on from it. I think you have an understanding of what it is they're doing and what we can do as a conditioning of it, and we can do that in our address of it down the road here. So I want to move on to color. So we have a colorist here, and we have the architect. So who wants to speak to the arrival of the colors as they are first or most philosophically, and then into the actual color choices themselves? So why these colors, and then what do you want to propose? Talk about the color choices.
The one with the options? Yeah, I can start with option 3, which was the, I'm sorry, my name is Christina and I work for Patrick Mora. And this is the option we first started with because we were rebranding the name of Budget Inn into the Palms. And we thought it would be a good option to use the mosaic in order to break the facades and give them a little bit of more flow instead of a regular flat wall that tends to become more old with time, and it needs more maintenance than these concrete slabs that we proposed as a mosaic. As for the colors, we thought it would give different characteristics to the area and the town of Corte Madera. Since they asked us to propose a second option, we went to the colorist, and with option 2, he gave us this option, which didn't include the mosaics inside on the facades, and it was more according to all the colors surrounding the existing building. And then taking in consideration the colors proposed by the colorist plus our design, which the mosaics, we came up with option 1, which is using the same colors that the colorist proposed, but at the same time continuing with the mosaic that was originally proposed by us in order to break the facades. And if you look at the side facade from building A and B, as we discussed, they asked us to break the facades in order for them not to look completely flat, and that's why we have proposed this in all the sides of the buildings. And if you have questions, the colorist can also explain his option 2.
Okay, is there a philosophical explanation you would like to provide, or some sort of explanation of how you arrived at this? We have a community that it has nothing like this in it, and if you want to propose it, please justify it. So it's a far reach, and I want to hear why and so forth. So one of you should speak to that as to why this selection of colors. I don't know who that is amongst you, and say why go so far with this when there's nothing like it, or it's a contemporary assembly of colors that doesn't exist in Corte Madera, and you want to sort of put a stake way out there in front of anything else we have in town. So explain that, or why not a different color assembly that does break up the level of the building in a different way with colors rather than these panels.
Well, the colors that we used was for the rebranding of the hotel, but we didn't want to go too far in the colors, and we thought that using darker shades of blues will not be that far out different, as if we were using super bright colors. And we wanted to also keep the characteristics of a small town, which is why we're proposing the use of wood around the buildings and around the flood wall to keep these characteristics. And that was our initial proposal for the blues, but the white ones came later when they said we should have another option.
Okay. All right. With that said, Phil, would you go back to option 2? Are we seeing option 2 on this board over here, or do we have anything other than these images that shows us option 2?
This is the only images we have for option 2, and that board was made for option 3 only.
3 only. Okay. Given the commentary about breaking up the elevations with color, and then you looked at this and just put plain, simple colors on it without trying to break up the elevations too much. It looks like there's a little bit of breakup there. I can see it in the end of the upper right building here. Looks like you've got sort of a triangle of different color here, and then a band across here somehow and so forth. So we usually insist on having these colors in front of us to understand what they are.
So we do have colors. I'll give them to you.
And so that's number 1, is to have those colors for the public record and for us to review, and then they actually become a part of the file of the project. Secondly, with regard to the blues and the grays and so forth, if you guys want to pursue that option, I would ask the other commissioners if they would feel like conditioning this to have you do a full-size mock-up of 2 rows of that color out there if you wanted to pursue it. We would then continue the hearing and public notice it, and people would be able to see those colors in position out there. I don't think that the renderings represent it. That doesn't represent it accurately enough. And for the town to understand the impact of these colors, I think it's fair that they would see that out there. So if you wanted to go forward with those colors, I would ask for a mock-up and ask the other commissioners if they wanted to see that, or if they even want to bother considering one of the other panel options. We can go to this option, and they would need to provide us with these colors, and I dare say that this should not be conforming to the standard of color sample sheets that we asked for, which is an 11 by 17 board that shows these colors on them in the appropriate fashion. So that said, what I'm getting at is that there's a couple of things here before we ask the other commissioners for some commentary on color, but we're going to have to come back to this, and you choose how you want to do it after you hear from the other commissioners, whether they want to see mock-ups of any of these out there on site. We've done that with other projects and put up sheets of the color on the building so that people understand what they look like in place. And you might do option 2 on one building, and you might do option 3 on another building, and people then might say, hey, option 2 is nice, but it's really bland. And then they might be attracted to your other option. I'm not presupposing anything, but you've clearly put some effort into a design option and you want it considered. So, with that said, I'm going to ask you guys how you feel about the colors, since we have the color people here at our attention.
Just a point of order,
Yes.
Chair Chase, you may want to open public comment before you engage in this level of discussion and decision.
Okay, point of order about that. So, I will do that, but before I do, are there any technical questions you guys want to ask of the applicant right now before we open it up to public hearing comment? Technical question?
I have a question. Can you explain, and I don't know if you want us to bring the board over closer to you, but can you explain how the paneling works, if it's like different elevations, if some of the panels are popping out, and what the materials are? Because I'm trying to put all the pieces together between the colors and the concrete and some of the, in the rendering, you know, portions of it are white and black and gray and blue, and just if you could map out for us how the panels actually look and feel relative to what we see on the board, that would be helpful.
Okay, so all the panels that are there are pre-made concrete slabs that come in very different colors, which is the right one on the top side. Yeah, that one. And those ones on the bottom are the same type, yeah. So those ones at the bottom, we can use both those to create different textures and different colors. And they have been pre-made, and these are sizes that come and that we can mix and match depending on like giving more light or more accents in some areas and using those panels that we have.
Okay, so nothing is white and black.
Nothing is definitely not black. White, yes, it's lighter. It's not completely white. It just looks very white in the renderings because it enhances the colors. But it should be like a lighter gray, not necessarily white.
Okay, so is everything that's in the rendering represented on this color board in one of those two panels?
Yes.
Okay. So there's nothing, and then there are also some blue stucco.
Yeah, the blue
Portions as
will
well?
be on the top left. That's the actual color of how it would look like. Yeah, that one.
Okay, and that is also mixed in with these precast concrete panels.
No, the facades with the mosaics will only be the concrete panels, and the rest of the facades are painted with the left top color.
Okay, got it. And how big are the panels?
They're like 2 by 1 foot.
Okay, 2 feet high and
Yeah.
1 foot wide.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I think I read that these are Heath ceramic panels, is that correct? Yes.
Mhm.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they've already been pre-made, so it's easy to mix and match.
Dr.
Okay.
Dr. Bunny, any technical questions out of this conversation?
No, I think I would also like to hear from the public.
Right, okay. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
So that said, now that we've talked a little bit about that, I will stand and open this to public comment at this time on the, anything relative to this project. So who would like to step up to the microphone and make a comment at this time about the project?
Hello, Patty Stolier, Casa Buena Drive. And I was at work earlier, so did you address if they're labeled correctly between Meadowsweet and Casa Buena? Because it looked like we were seeing the Casa Buena side. Has that already been
It's
covered?
been discussed, has not been severely pointed out, but we know that they're not labeled correctly.
Okay, so, because I'm still trying to understand which is facing which. And then when you made the comment about the sign being on Meadowsweet, it sounded like, oh, maybe it is, that is the entry is. So I'm very confused about that. But I totally agree with what Peter Chase said about this is like nothing we've seen in Corte Madera, and looks like something from the 50s in the Midwest. And I certainly appreciate that the budget in needs to be revamped. But man, we can do so much better than this kind of a rendering. Also, looking at the colors, it looked like the pictures were in black and white. I couldn't even understand what the colors were supposed to be. So Jennifer's point about having it seen on the board, I think, is very important, and maybe a better rendering to be able to see on photographs. So please, back to the drawing board for a better image. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Anyone else to make a public comment, please?
Michael Harlock, 533 Redwood. I apologize in the sense that this is the first time I've looked at it, but I spent quite a few minutes, and I'll just say that the architecture, I mean, besides the front, it seems very discordant to me. There's very bland side elevations, and then this high articulation of the front, and then one of the rear elevations, for some reason, carries this very articulated mosaic, and the top is blank, and the other rear elevation is just painted squares of stucco. Also, if the building, if particularly Building A, is being rebuilt, basically, I don't understand why the long continuous roof lines, basically just endless eaves. I think the buildings would benefit tremendously from being articulated. I know that there's probably not an unlimited budget for this type of thing, but I find this very discordant thing between a highly articulated front. I'm willing to see how it could be further developed, but right now it's hard to get behind. And then you see it in combination with some of these side and rear elevations. It just is, to me, it's not brought together architecturally. And I think the massing and even the plans could be broke up in a minor way. I know this is a relatively inexpensive motel product, but still the very straight, long walls, I think we can do a lot better. I think that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. All right, who else in the audience tonight would like to stand up and say something regarding this project? All right, I don't see anyone coming to continue public comment on this budget-in project, so we'll close the public comment section and bring it back up to the dais here to discuss this outside of the two letters that we have and two commenters here. Just in passing in town, I've certainly had people comment to me, but most of them are in the same demeanor as what we've just heard about the panels and about the blockiness of the building. So that said, we have to, a couple things before us here, and we have to decide whether or not we are going to ask them to, or live with the design review findings that we have to make. We have to make the sign findings. We have to accept the conditional use of this hotel, which seems like that's something we all want, but I will let each of you speak to that. So the design, the conditional use, the design review, the sign permit, and there are also other issues that I would bring to bear on this application, but I want to hear from each of you. So that said, Dr. Bundy, what are your thoughts here about those things that we've heard and what you might want to say about this and what you would want the applicant to hear, or maybe you'd want to go ahead and approve this? So you tell us where you'd like to go.
I'm not prepared to approve this evening. I would like to see the applicant come back with flood management issues that reflect the current FEMA flood map for Corte Madera. Maybe try to rethink some of your flood plans for flood-proofing the building. And I think there's a sense that the panels on the end of the building are not right, and there's some variation in B that is more desirable, but would come back with some colors that really fit in more with what is in Corte Madera currently, what is in the community, and let us take another look at it.
Okay. Bob, in terms of design review, is that the extent of your design review thoughts regarding the panels and the ends of the building? So I will also add the caveat that the flood walls and so forth do affect the architecture of the building, but anything else you want to say about the architecture?
I'm concerned how some of the wood strips really look, and I had a hard time getting a good sense of the building and what it was really going to look like from the plans here. So I'd like to come back and see that more fleshed out. I think Michael Harlock made some good comments about some simple variation of the roof structure, of the end facades. I'd also hope that there'd be reconsideration of this freestanding sign.
All right, thank you. Jennifer?
Sure. So first addressing the conditional use, which is to allow for the 4 additional rooms, correct? That's specific just for the conditional use. That I'm okay with, and I can approve the conditional use. As far as the design review goes, there are a few things that I'd like to the applicant to address. The first is just the design overall. I appreciate actually that you guys are trying to make it, more interesting and not just another gray box. And I'm actually not a fan of option 2 because I think it just looks like everything else. So I appreciate that you're trying to use some different materials, concrete, wood, and I think that is not a bad direction to go. As you've heard, and I think you will continue to hear, I think there are going to be folks who have issue with the blue. Maybe you want to consider blue in some element as an accent color, but maybe that doesn't become the primary color of the buildings, or maybe you think about other ways to color it. I think that as people are, the mosaic end caps, maybe there's a component of that, but maybe it's not, the full facade on both sides. So I guess overall, I'd like to see some other options, and I think that those seem like very extreme. Between option 2 and option 3, those are very extremely different, and it seems to me like there are probably some variations within there. If there are elements of the concrete panels that you guys like, maybe you could do, a component of it that way, but not the entire facade, or just thinking a little bit about how you might still bring an element of architectural interest to the project without it being the gray box, but not necessarily as extreme maybe as what you've presented in option 3. I would like to see, I didn't see this anywhere, so I apologize if we missed it somewhere, but your exterior lighting specs, and I think we have some pretty stringent guidelines around nighttime lighting and things like that, so we'd like to see what those fixtures are and where they are on the buildings. And then finally, addressing the sign, the exterior sign. I am not supportive of a sign that's 16 feet high. So, and the standalone sign, I think, in general, I would like you guys to think about. And if you think it is an important business component to getting people that are driving by on Tamil Vista, I guess, but it's not a sign that people see from the 101, given its orientation on Tamil Vista. So I would be more supportive of a monument sign and getting rid of the tall freestanding sign altogether. And I guess we'd like to probably see a little bit more detail around the sign of a better rendering of what it looks like. Maybe you have other, just understanding the lettering and the sizing and such. If you decide that you really want to pursue the freestanding, tall, 15-foot sign, I think we need a good case around it, because a lot of the findings relating to the sign, particularly 5 and 6, I think are hard to make in this case. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Nicolo?
Okay, so I will try to follow protocol as much as I can. Starting with trying to make all the findings. A conditional use permit. I concur with previous comments. I can make the finding. Then design review findings. I cannot make the findings number 1 and number 6 and number 8, and I'm going to explain what I mean. First of all, the renderings, which would be part of the finding number 1, I have hard time, as was stated before, to really understand and clearly see the colors, because it seems to me, or at least I cannot be sure whether it's blue, whether it's green, so I'm kind of confused. Because of that, therefore, I can really make the findings. However, if the colors would be the one that I think they look like as presented, all of them, I personally, once again, cannot make the findings. I don't think that they are compatible, none of them, even the gray one, with the surroundings. Okay, so that's as far as colors. However, one underline, I think is a great project. I think we all wanted it, and it was long hoped for, and so I would like that it get understood that is really, really, really an opportunity for everyone. So it's not a negative, but it's a positive outcome. The original question regarding the percentage of demo, it was for all what we talked about. However, also was trying to understand exactly if we're talking of remodeling, alteration, versus new construction. Because someone can say, well, we don't like the overall shapes, the forms, and the volumes, and we want to redo the roof, which the roofs are done. But overall, when you do a remodel or an alteration, unless you've got so much money, then you need to stay within certain parameters. So I understand that. So the volumes overall needs to be kind of maintained. You can play with parts, but you can really change and start to break apart the building. So I needed to get some feelings on how much this project can really come out of the box in terms of shapes. And so I'm convinced that they did the right approach, and they're staying within the envelope of the frames as much as possible. However, within these findings, finding number 6, for example, I do believe that maybe there is some possibility of creating breaking up. For example, the east elevation is pretty heavy duty, maybe, because this is a rendering. Once we see a construction, then things are different, has another feel to it, has body. This is like a two-dimensional, so we shouldn't really get caught on what we see on color. Materials, then they breathe and they come out and they live on their own. So it appears to be a linear volume, but maybe it's not going to be. However, I think that maybe there's potential now to just maybe redefine maybe the roof lines a little bit on these long sections. And so lastly, I couldn't make the findings, and I think that we're really close. Lastly, the sign. I have also, I cannot make one finding, which is number 2. Then perhaps there's another one, but it should be 15 feet in the 16, so automatically it cannot be made. I also concur that maybe that kind of sign is not really, doesn't look like to be maybe, so it's, go back to the design review finding number 8, talks about the sign, so I'm not sure that is within the character of the town, but maybe it is. I think that the sign should be really an option given to the applicant in base of what is the logic and the objective of the sign. They probably have done some study, I suppose, and if they think that a sign like that can attract more clientele, maybe that's the way it should be. But so I am more on the discussing it. Pretty much. So to summarize, I think I'm very excited. I think it's can be really changing some colors. Maybe it can be presenting another color. I don't see. I mean, we need to meet the finding that it kind of integrate to the surroundings. It is difficult because the area doesn't have that much to integrate, but I don't think that overall the community, in my opinion, is intrigued by these proposals. So.
Okay. Does that summarize everything you've got on your plate there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we'll try to wrap this up here, and essentially what we're going to ask you to do is to come back to us with some revisions, some of which you've heard, and I will try to summarize them. One of the things that I would like to see is the set of plans upgraded to have the right information on it in the right place, the right labeling on it, and so forth. Where the elevations are labeled correctly, the parties involved are labeled properly, etc. I would also ask that the structural engineer write a letter saying that those existing footings and footprint of the buildings are going to be acceptable on which to build this structure. Because that affects how we view it and how we see it. And that's all we can do is ask you for that information. I didn't get to ask the applicant, but you guys can provide a response to staff as to why no solar on this building. It's a pretty good location for a solar project, and maybe you have some justification for that. So one of the things that is clear is that the FEMA information and the information relative to the height of water, what's waterproof, etc., needs to be updated on the plans. It's not reflective of the current FEMA requirements to the town, and comment about maybe a window needs to be raised or the level of the dry areas of the building, that has to be addressed and brought up to the town code requirements. So we do have an agreement that the conditional use, the hotel, needs to be the hotel. Everybody wants the hotel. It's a great project. It needs to go in. For my part, in addressing the design review, I understand why you guys chose this very contemporary plan and the sleekness and all of that. But it is extraordinarily too sleek and a little too contemporary in this town, unless you can demonstrate that it really has some appeal, and the only way to do that would be to get some mock-ups out there. So that's an issue you have to decide, and you can communicate through staff what you want to present as a set of color options out there on the site, on the buildings. Get some panels out there, notify them, notify us, and that'll go out as a public notice to everybody, and you can present 1, 2, or 3 options, however many options you want, but label them clearly, get them out there, and they'll make notice of it. But I think that because these drawings don't demonstrate to us, and some of us are professionals in this, it's hard to understand the impact of those colors on that site. So doing it on site will have an extraordinary impact and it'll be very clear to anybody in the town. So I think that's very important. The windows are represented as blue in the drawings. I don't know if that's because of window coverings or that's just how someone decided to color glass in the renderings. I don't know what that is. But if there's blue shades going in there, it's going to be blue. And you need to say that we're going to have blue window coverings inside these rooms. So that's a part of the illustrative nature of the drawings. So the colors are the big issue. I don't know what else you could do to the architecture, but clearly form and function is driving part of this. Color is function to part of this, and you have to decide what you want to highlight with color as a part of the form and function here, right? So stairways you've highlighted as a color. That's a function with a color. How do you want to do that? And if you decide to go about creating a new color scheme, I applaud that effort, and you need to continue that idea of identifying certain parts of the building and creating some curb appeal with color. It needs curb appeal. I think that the gray number 2 has no curb appeal, and I think you need to go beyond that. And I understand why that was thrown out, because everything is gray. The medical offices were remodeled just a few years ago, and I don't know that they're going to come down anytime soon. So that's what you're next to. But this could be cool, and I encourage you to be cool, but I also encourage you to figure out what works there and put something on site. And when you put something on site, you may stand back and go, huh, you know what, that doesn't work. We need to do something else. So get out there with your color palettes, decide what it is, and then notify the town, and we'll look at it and consider it for the next hearing. I think that you've heard also that the sign is a problem. We would all prefer a sign of the existing height or a monument sign there. It is, the sign that's in the drawings is, it's a little metro for Corte Madera. If I say Las Vegas or anything like that, it'll never go off the record, but that's kind of where it comes from. So it's a little far for this town. So please bring it back to a grounded, more simpler country, small town sign. I think you guys have the capability to design something that doesn't take us to another city or another century, but certainly stays within Corte Madera. And you can see there's plenty going on around here that is pretty hip and pretty happening, and you guys can figure that out and look at it. So we're all on board with the hotel being the hotel. You go down that road, get the flood management plans picked out, spend a lot of time on your colors. Please see if you can break the box up. Maybe in looking at the stairwells, you create some interruption in the roof lines to cover those stairwells, or some way to break out those long expanses of roof. It's clearly, in one hand, it's a very contemporary design. On the other hand, it's a really contemporary design, and it's just a long, long roof. So if you created something that broke it up, I think that's what I'm hearing is a consensus here. Among other things, I would bring back a landscape plan that has identification photos of all of the species that are proposed on site. We've got drawings of the Washingtonia, we know what they look like, but all the other proposed plantings need to have pictures and an ID that says where it goes on site. That's a clear requirement that we like to have in landscape plans. Mm-hmm. Secondly, then on the lighting plan, there was one light fixture in there, but there's a lot of different lights on site, so please try to identify what those lights are everywhere and show what they are and show the lumens and the color of lights that you're proposing. And lastly, about lighting on the sign, there's one detail of the lighting of the sign on the building, but there's no detail of the lighting inside the big sign So when you do come up with a sign design, please include the parameters of the lighting that's inside the sign. It has to be dimmable, and it has to be, go off at certain times, et cetera, as the town ordinance provides. So you have to include that. I think Nicolo's comment about the percentage of demolition circles back to structural engineer providing that letter that I'm asking you to provide, that he can build this building on top of those existing footprints. The FEMA issue is one that we all don't quite understand, the idea of somebody running out and throwing in the floodgates, but it clearly is in use. So if you get the requirements of FEMA on the plans and up to snuff, maybe you can get Dr. Bundy to agree to it. So that's sort of my lasting list of issues. Do you guys feel like you have them all? Okay. So do we want to continue this to a date certain or a date uncertain? Do you think?
I think we'd probably ask the applicant of that, but given the fullness of our agenda, I think probably a date uncertain would be best for staff. I'm sorry?
We would prefer certain dates if that's possible.
Say, it's, you know, a 2-week option, a 4-week option, 4-week option.
Well, you don't have the 2-week option.
Yeah, right.
So you have a 4-week option or 6-week option or?
4 is a month and a half. It's pretty good.
I'm not exactly sure.
You can do revisions.
I think it'd be difficult to.
Okay.
Yeah, and given the commission's request for mocking up of colors and noticing of that, unless the applicant has a specific date in mind at this moment.
We can go with 4 or 6 weeks off.
Okay, so it sounds like we should do a date uncertain at this point.
Okay, we'll do a date uncertain. We have plenty of time for noticing. Yes, so let's decide collectively. So I would like a motion from one of you guys as to the continuance of this with all of those things that I brought forth.
As long as we don't have to repeat them all, correct?
And others.
I can make a motion to continue is that,
Date uncertain is really,
The other one. Yeah.
am I not reading the right thing? Okay, I'm sorry. I can make a motion to continue to a date uncertain,
Yeah.
the resolution number 17012, the conditional use permit, design review and sign permit application for a 7,947,000 square foot hotel motel remodel and renovation, including site modifications and landscape improvements to the existing budget inn at 706 Meadowsweet Drive.
Second.
second, all right. Vote.
Vote, Commissioner Friedman,
Aye.
Commissioner Bundy. Aye. Commissioner Caldera,
Aye.
Commissioner Chase.
Yes,
Commissioner.
so,
Right, this is going back to a date uncertain, so there will be renoticing of the project,
right.
and the date will be determined as soon as the applicant is ready and staff are ready.
All right, we'll take a short break while everybody exits, but I want to thank the applicant for coming in force with
Thank
as
you.
much information as possible, and that we're behind you to get a good project out of this. Thank you.
I need to switch.
So it is 10:15, and in our rules and regulations, we have a specific item that says after 10 o'clock, we have to vote whether we will start a new item. So I will put it before us right now, whether we will begin this item. I would propose that we go to 11 with a hard stop at 11, wherever we are at that point. But we can vote now on whether we'll start it. Is everybody, we can do a voice vote on that.
I agree to keep on going.
Okay, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Okay, Bob? Yeah. Okay, we're all in agreement. We'll start it. Thank you. So That said, we've got in front of us item number 5C, 141 Crescent Road, a design review and variance application to add 1,202 square feet of living space and 259 square feet of a one-car garage to the existing 748 square foot house at 141 Crescent. The project also includes a variance to allow a portion of one of the required parking spaces and a 5-foot tall fence to encroach over the front property line. So, Mr. Boyle.
Okay, I'll give a quick overview and then some of the specifics and talk about the two handouts that I just presented to you. 147 there, Peter? Yeah, right there.
Okay.
So I'll just mention those. The two items in front of you are one, staff. So item one is a memo from myself to you all regarding a particular part of our code that addresses side yard setbacks. So that's item number one, and I'll talk about that in more detail. It's like Peter, you got two of the same.
Yeah.
Item number two is a comment from, I'm sorry, I might, yes, a letter from the neighbor 135, representing 135, the attorney, an attorney representing that. And the attorney talks about that particular code section that I've clarified, hopefully, in the memo. So I'll talk about those more at the end. So 141 Crescent Road, design review and variance. Design review for an addition to a single-family home. We're located in Christmas Tree Hill, just up the hill from Redwood Avenue. The project consists of, it has an existing FAR of 11, proposed FAR of 37, maximum allowed is 40, so it meets the FAR. Lot coverage proposed is 34, allowed is 34, so it's maxing out lot coverage. In terms of setbacks, it meets all the setbacks except for the proposed encroachment into beyond the front property line. Christmas Tree Hill has a variable front yard setback. So the front yard setback is 0 or whatever number you want to account for. In this particular case, they are asking for not a variance related to the setbacks. Actually, this isn't completely correct in terms of the way I wrote it, but it's to encroach part of the parking space beyond the property line and into town right-of-way. It will be quite a far distance from edge of pavement, so it will in no way obstruct traffic. This encroachment has been okayed by Public Works. They're also proposing to put a small 5-foot fence at the center of the structure, partially encroaching into that right-of-way as well. Proposed height is 25.5 feet. Allowed height is 30 feet. Parking, the existing parking, and I think I apologize, there's a typo in the staff report in the bottom of the table. This slide is correct. Existing parking is 2 uncovered. Proposed is, they're proposing a single-car garage, and then 2 uncovered spaces will remain. Required is 2 spaces, 1 being covered. So to get a visual of what's happening here, the red is more or less the outline of the existing structure, very small, single-family home. The blue is what is proposed to expand, and the expansion is, a great room, living room, dining room, kitchen, and then the 1-car garage. The whole expansion going to the west, where currently is a vacant part of the lot. Also down below this, red is the second story the lower story is being finished. Currently is an unfinished area, so that's being excavated. The footprint of that red polygon is not really expanding, but it's just being filled in down below. The 2 green rectangles are the small encroachment area that they're proposing. The purple is the property line. So this is the part where the back of the parking space will hang over. This is a small 5-foot fence. Edge of pavement is this here. So it's all quite a ways off of edge of pavement. Several public parking spaces like Christmas Tree Hill has identified on both sides of Crescent. Applicant is proposing to shift one of those parking spaces, which is here, shifting it, I think, 6 to 8 feet to the east and moving it down so they can access their garage. So no loss of parking spaces for the public, but just a relocation of one of them. And that has also been okayed by Public Works. In terms of elevations, existing elevation upper left, the small Mediterranean-style home. The proposed elevation is, so here's existing, proposed again, the great room basically expanding to the left and then the single-car garage. Not a significant change in height, keeping the flat roof design. There is obviously stepping up here and stepping up here to increase, to follow the contour of the site. The site does travel from left to right. It slopes down as you're going down Crescent, and then from front to back, it drops quite a bit from the front yard to the backyard. Proposed rear elevation. This is the existing home here, and this line actually indicates the addition from the back. Proposed east elevation is shown here. Not a huge difference. This is the new extension of the great room beyond. Proposed west elevation. So this is the elevation that is seen from the neighbor who's commented. He is located. They are located at 135 Crescent, just slightly up the hill and adjacent to the west. So this elevation really doesn't exist at this point because all this is being built toward them. In terms of letter of support from neighbors, they reached out from the neighbors and got the neighbors in green, a little bit hard to see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are folks that submitted approval of the plans. 135 Crescent is here adjacent, has the concerns. Just some photos of neighboring homes. This is 135 itself. This is a little farther up Crescent. I just took pictures of downsloping lots. Most of the homes are fairly shielded because they fall down the hill. Just some examples. So now, in terms of views and responding to some of the concerns from 135 Crescent. As you saw, quite a bit of information from them. I did meet with him numerous times in the last several months and spoke with him in great detail about various aspects of the project, the side yard setback, which I'll talk about in a moment, view impacts, the ability to put the garage. The garage could be put pretty much anywhere they wanted to put the garage because Christmas Tree Hill allows you to put it forward or back. Obviously, they can go to the side. The folks at 135 Crescent wanted the garage to be pushed, closer to the street, thereby removing what they see to some of the view obstructions. So this is the same photo that's in your staff report, and what I'm trying to show here is, and this is from, and I don't know if any of you or all of you had a chance to visit the site. 135 Crescent did, open their home up to the commission. This is looking from their dining room window, looking pretty much directly east. And I put in the story poles. The story poles are difficult to see, and the tape is difficult to see in the trees, but they're more or less located here. So this is where this lower area is the studio below the garage. Then there's a stepped back portion, and this is the back of the garage. Same here, and if I turn off the lights, we could see it better, but it's in the staff report. This picture I'm taking, not zooming in at all. I'm standing on the back porch, looking east. So this is inside the home looking east, back porch looking east, and story poles are there, and there. If one just look in the back porch and look left towards the bay, this is the view that I currently saw, or I did see. So the bay is beyond there, but obviously this is obstructed quite a bit by the trees. The proposed project is not even visible. The proposed project is way over here. These several trees, I think one is under the control of 141 Crescent, but I believe several of the other ones are not. We did discuss this. Again, when I went out there, I met with 135 Crescent was there, the applicants of 141, and the architect. We were all there, 4 of us, and discussed the various aspects of the project. So in addressing the memo that I sent to you, so there is a portion, I'll try to explain this relatively easy. So 2 things. One, we discovered that there is a typographical error in the code, and the code transposes the 2 images. And if you look in my memo, you'll see I've X'd out, where the old one is and put in the new. So the section of the code that this project pertains to and the letters regarding deals with increasing the setbacks, increasing the side yard setbacks of properties that are on steep slopes. Okay, that's what it really comes down to. This was done in 1994. I'm not exactly sure why the town adopted this, but they did. And this is the image that's in the code, and then I've kind of mocked up this image to hopefully make it a little bit better. So these 2 elevations we're looking at are the front elevations. It's kind of hard to picture that because you don't see a garage door or a front door. But you imagine these 2 as front elevations. And we will imagine that this house exists, and this is a proposed brand-new house. So the code says if you want to build a brand-new house next to somebody else, and the slope, the side yard slope from going left to right or right to left, is 10% or greater, you need to terrace it or wedding cake the house back to protect these guys so this person doesn't have a big looming house. And so what the code says is your first 12 feet can be as close as the code allows, 6 feet or 5 feet in this case. So your 12-foot box can be 6 feet away, but anytime you go above 12 feet, every time you go up 2, you have to go away 1. So they've gone in this diagram. They've gone up 12 feet, and so they had to go in 6 feet. So this is that notching effect, and so that is what the 135's attorney is discussing. She had the incorrect figure in her discussion. She reads it, and the neighbor interprets that code section differently. In their opinion, the whole box, in this particular case, this whole box should end here. They don't interpret that section of the code as terracing. They just say, if you're building a box that's over 12 feet tall, the whole box needs to be more than 6 feet away. So based upon the language in the code and this section, this is the way staff interprets this section of the code. Any questions on that or on my memo? Or did you? And I'll just point out how, so this project meets this section of the code. And this project meets this section of the code by notching right here. So this is where the concerned neighbor is. So they have notched the first, this is greater than 12 feet, but this wall is farther away than 5 than it needs to be. So they've notched the first section, and they've notched the second section, and they've complied with the code.
And how far away is it? The first
It is,
12 feet?
let me grab,
Here.
Oh, thank you.
I think, yeah, I put it in the staff report. It is,
Yeah,
so 7 feet 2 inches for the lower studio unit, So this unit is, this box is 7 feet, 2 inches away from the side property line, which is what the code requires. And the upper level garage, page 2 of the staff report, is 11 feet, 9 inches away, and that meets the code requirement. So, yeah, it's not as simple as 6 and 12 like in the diagram, but the architect has done the math correctly, and I've checked it, and it is accurate. So, any questions on that before?
Not on that.
Okay.
I just had a question on your photograph.
Sure. Let me just, did I finish my PowerPoint? So that's the view, that. Yeah, so that concludes my report. Again, extensive work with all parties, and believe this staff is able to make all the findings for both design review and the variance.
Okay. So, questions for staff. Nicola, do you have any questions for Mr.
No
Boyle?
questions.
All right.
No.
Jennifer?
No questions.
All right. Dr. Bundy?
Yeah, Phil, on the parking variance, why would there be a required parking variance? Because they have one covered parking spot and one uncovered parking spot on the existing driveway.
Because their one uncovered parking space extends beyond their property. It's sticking into, it's sticking onto town property.
No, I'm saying the one uncovered one should be because the existing old driveway that's there now is going to stay, as I understand it.
That's true. And however, that one actually hangs over town property as well.
But where they park their cars, or, if you park the car near the house, that's well within the property line, I had thought in looking at it.
It looks like it is, but according to the drawing, it's not.
Oh.
And we measure parking by, again, not by a rectangle, not by the car. So yeah. So if you look on the site plan there, it shows.
Yeah, but down here.
Right here.
Okay.
It's right here, too.
I can bring up I don't know if I can zoom into this.
Okay.
All right.
Phil, on the photograph you have,
Right.
looking over there, you've got 2 photographs that you put black lines on.
Uh-huh.
And one of them shows a window, single window.
Right.
This one here.
Uh-huh.
And as I recall, that is a sliding window.
Correct.
And this would appear to be through one section of the slider. Is this through the left or the right-hand section of the slider?
I'm pretty sure it's through the left-hand section of the slider.
So you're saying to the right of this line here is the right-hand piece of slider? Or is it
Yes.
that over here is the other one over here?
I'm not exactly sure.
Are you talking about
Let me,
standing on the deck?
if I could, I have some other photos.
Okay.
If
And then
if
from the-
I can answer that in a little bit more detail.
So then you step out to the deck.
Correct.
And
That's the barbecue
this
down
edge
below.
of the building, this gutter is the eave that's over this space right here.
Correct.
So then you're looking directly at the elevation, but back here is the existing building.
Right.
Then this is a tree that's either lower on the lot, or that one there is further on the next property. There's another tree that is beyond the house. It's a big tall redwood, I think, that's beyond. It's right in the line of the existing house beyond there, and it essentially is in line with this, and it blocks anything beyond the house. This pittosporum is one that's on 135 or 141. There's 3 of them, I think, or 4 of them that you pointed out that are there, and they obscure the view toward the bay. So this oak is one that's going to come down, or the neighbor's asking to be trimmed?
So the site plan shows an oak with two trunks, each roughly 10 inches in diameter, so it does not require a tree permit, right adjacent to the new building. So that stemmed oak is going away, and it's more or less in here.
Right.
The large, and then there's a much larger oak, about 24 inches, which is down the hill, which I think is, maybe some of this, that is to remain. And the applicant and the gentleman at 135, spoke about the possibility of trimming these trees. That seemed like something that they were both open to.
Okay, well, while you look through your other photos, then,
Yeah.
then perhaps we can hear from the applicant, right? So,
My name's Stephanie. I'm not the applicant. My father-in-law is, but my husband and I will be buying the house from him upon completion. I teach elementary school, and my husband is a teacher at San Francisco Opera, and then also is a musician by trade.
all right,
So-
would you please make sure that microphone is on and speak into it? Yes.
The guy did that before.
Could she use this microphone right here, the corner?
Yeah. If you want to
Phil's
sit-
almost
if
got
you
it.
want to sit down here.
We've got it. Oh, okay.
They have an endless supply of batteries in the town of Corte Madera.
Brought to you by Tesla.
Great, thanks. I can start over again. And there's my husband now. So I'm not the applicant. My father-in-law is, but my husband and I are going to be buying the house from him upon completion and moving in. I teach elementary school in San Francisco, and my husband teaches with the San Francisco Opera's outreach program and is a musician by trade, as you can see. He's just coming from a dress rehearsal. We currently live in a house in Mill Valley that we can't afford, and we obviously can't afford two houses at the same time, which is why my father-in-law is doing this for us. He's been kind enough to buy the house. We'll be doing the work of building it, and then we'll purchase it from him. Moving into the house would be me, my husband, and our 14-month-old daughter. Age upon completion to be determined. And we really, in addition to the financial aspect, we've fallen in love with Corte Madera. We have nothing against Mill Valley. My husband grew up there, my in-laws are there, but we've really been enjoying our time in Corte Madera as we've been walking around and exploring the town. We really love this house's design. It sounds really corny and cheesy, but I'd say it's our dream house. It's laid out, it has room for a growing family, it has studio space, so I don't have to step around instruments all day long. And it's a dream neighborhood with all the steps and the paths and the neighbors. It's pretty much exactly what we were looking for. And I don't know, a lot of the things that I was going to share were covered in terms of what we were working on with the design and with the parking and the different guidelines. We reached out, my husband and father-in-law reached out pretty extensively to the neighbors in the neighborhood. So most of the neighbors right across on Crescent, so Sherry and Jeff Buck supported the project, and Chris and Marcel Perry did. They were both concerned cutting down the tree that we need to cut down in order to lay the parking pad. However, they talked quite a bit about fast-growing drought-resistant plants that we'd like to put in there. Liz Hodgkin's house is the one below us, and to my understanding, she said we do not negatively impact her. And then Mark Rudy in particular was worried about privacy as well as the rock wall on his area. And so we agreed to build a 6 to 8 foot privacy fence for his and our mutual benefit, and have a soils engineer monitoring all aspects of the building. And I think he seemed to think that that would do the job. It's definitely not a land grab. We're not giving him the property. We're simply building a fence to create privacy. The neighbor that most disagrees with the property is Richard Howard, and I think the letter highlight some of that. We feel like we've met most of the concerns. We met with him at least 4 times. And I think our architect can sort of take over from there. I'm happy to go more into some of our work with Richard Howard if you'd like. But
No, please, let's hear from your architect, yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I'm Alex Riley, and I think almost everything here has been covered. But there's a couple things. When we first started this project, we were told by the neighbors that 2 things were important: was to maintain the character of the neighborhood, and 2, to take care of parking situations. And with our development, we have 1 in the garage, 2 in front of the garage, and one next to the house. So, and another one that's up towards the street. There's five cars can park there if necessary. And other than that, we've maintained the character identical of the house that's there. We're carrying that out, and it's part of the neighborhood. There's a house just below us, downhill, that's obviously done by the same developer. That's the identical character of what we're doing, and we're keeping that. We're following all the rules. We're within all the setbacks except for the back end of cars, and we think we've done a pretty nice job here. So, and I wouldn't mind having an opportunity to speak if anyone else, when we have all the information here.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else for the applicant that wants to say something? No, okay. Then I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions of the applicant before we go to public comment.
No questions.
No questions.
Wendy? No. Okay, I don't either. So, that said, please, I know there's some people here that would like to speak about it, so please step up to the microphone. You have the 3 minutes, and make your case for what I know is going to be about the view and so forth, so.
If I could just interject
Sure.
while he's coming up, just to answer your question in case other slides want to be shown. So, Chairman Chase, this is another photo showing obviously the center of that window. So, my staff report photo. Gosh, it's still hard to. And maybe Mr. Harlock could. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that the staff report photo is showing the far right end of the window and the center of post of the window. But there is another panel to the left of the photo at top of page 5. Is that?
Yeah, on the top of page 5, and I would ask that to the right of the vertical mullion in that photo, it looks almost like the siding is to the right, and that's why I say you're in the left-hand side of the window, right? So that's what you said, though, right? I know you thought you were on the right-hand side. So when I look at your photo on the page, it looks like the siding continues in the sliver of the photo to the right.
Yeah,
of
I
that
see what you're
vertical.
saying.
It almost looks like you're in the left-hand side of the window, from my perspective.
Yeah, I cannot say unequivocally
Right.
either way, unfortunately.
All right, so enough of that. Mr. Harlock, please. You starting to get up.
Michael Harlock, 533 Redwood Avenue. I first need to clarify that I've been asked to speak for the owner, the Howards at 135. I'm not speaking for the Christmas Tree Hill Dwellers, although I'm on their design committee. But I've talked this through with Phil, and so I want to make that distinction. You also have the comments of the Hill Dwellers in there. I think everybody's delighted to see this house renovated and expanded. That's not the issue at all. Certainly it's in keeping stylistically with what's there. To get to the main point of the neighbor next door, they feel that there's they're definitely interested in removing some of their own trees and capturing a view that his father, who owned the house, had for many years of the Richardson Bay, et cetera. I think my underlying point is that there seems to be some quite simple remedies to solving it for the neighbor, one of which, as they point out in their letter, is to simply slide the studio and garage forward. That's one. Because there's a lot of room. They're already encroaching slightly into the right-of-way, but another 3 or 4 feet, there's a lot of depth there before you get to the edge of pavement. And that would pretty much solve it. It would, moving the studio is a possibility. For example, putting it under the main living space. In putting the garage forward, I think it would address something that's, I don't think, adequately handled in the Christmas Tree Hill design guidelines, that building form should be articulate, large, unbroken expanses of the wall should be avoided. All buildings should have shadow relief created by modest overhang, minor projection. Phil, could you bring up the floor plan for me? In a summary form, the addition is one big rectangle. And I don't mean to be terribly pejorative about that, but you can see that the existing cottage sticks out quite far, and that's fine. And the rest is basically one long rectangle. So, am I out of time already?
Yeah. So, yeah, we're running against the clock,
Okay.
Michael, so.
All right, I'll
please-
sum up very quickly. So moving the studio would allow the garage to be lower, which is a very positive thing if that whole left-hand element could be lowered. Moving the garage studio out towards the street would still allow tandem parking. And in a way, I think foster the design, because, you know, these things, the existing sticks out so far, so having the garage come out would actually be an architectural enhancement. I don't think it would affect the budget whatsoever. Moving the studio could happen, which would allow the garage to be much lower. So there's about 5 fairly minor adjustments that could really address the primary concerns of the Howards, who are in favor and very glad to see the house being renovated. So I'll respond to any questions you have.
Just a moment, please, yes. Michael, the Howards aren't here, right?
The Howards are in London, and they apologize.
And you're the only person here to speak on their behalf, essentially?
I think so.
Yes, okay. So that said, then when we are there and you look at the photos, we read also that there's the issue of the views, but what I'm hearing is that the significant aspect is the proximity and the size of this elevation of the house.
Yeah, that's why they asked me to do a simple section, because the section that was, I think it would have been a good idea in any case, but what was presented stopped with the proposed house. So what I just gave you is showing the relationship, and I went out there and took elevated. So it's fairly accurate of the relationship of the two houses.
Right, and it's not really clear in your section how it pulls the garage forward, because they are sections through the property line showing the relationship.
It isn't meant to,
Yeah.
because I wanted to show the relative heights of the houses.
Sure.
A minor concern, by the way, I'm sorry, is this large window in the studio that looks directly at the house, the Howard's house. The garage window is less, but we don't know what the acoustics of the studio are, there may be a point in moving it. When I say moving it, this area is
have to-
elevated above grade, and the studio that's here could be located in this essentially crawl space a little bit further away. I don't think at great cost.
All right, so that's your justification for requesting that they alter their architectural design. So, I mean, I'm just trying to nail this down as to, the views are listed as, in letters, as items of discussion, but you're more objecting to the proximity of these walls to their house.
The view obstruction, I think, is probably their greatest concern.
All right. And the view obstruction is something that's clearly not been an issue until now, because the trees are fully grown, and each property owner is responsible for trimming some of those trees that block the view. So, that said, we're in public comment. So, sir, Mr. Riley, if you would like to make a comment, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. Please, yes. I didn't realize it. Please step up to the microphone and continue. I didn't realize that. Sorry. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Linda Meyer. I just have one small comment. I live at 124 Hill Path, which is right above Chris and Marcel's home, which is kind of across the street from where you guys are, or will be. And welcome to the neighborhood. My one concern is the parking and people with bigger cars getting through. Often in the morning, the garbage truck has a very difficult time and honks his horn pretty profusely because they have a very difficult time already getting through that one part of the street. And if there's any further encroachment out with the fence, I think that was being proposed, and I'm not sure what else, the garage or the driveway, I'm concerned that any parking, which is in very limited supply on that street as it is going to get even more tough, and people don't park within those white lines. They park beyond them because they're such small spots. So it will create more of a difficulty for bigger public vehicles to get through, I think. That's my one concern.
All right, thank you very much. Another person, please, step up to the microphone.
I'm Mark Rudy, 356 Redwood. I'm directly below the house.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my main concerns is it will be looking right down to my house. I'll lose all privacy. They say they're going to put a 6 to 8 foot fence. It might have to be up to 10-foot fence in order for me to keep any privacy at all. Also, there's a crumbling rock wall towards, directly below that new addition. That is, I lost about 4 feet of it last year and just natural slide during the winter. It's a very shaly wall that could give way more, and there's putting a big, expensive house directly above that falling slide area. That's a great concern to me. That's my major concern, the slide area and privacy.
Thank you very much.
It said there's 6 to 8 foot wall, but I think it might have to be up to 10-foot wall for me to keep privacy. Also, I have a concern of the soundproofing of the building they're putting on for a studio, which may be too loud for me to hear. The acoustics might be so bad for me to even be in my yard hearing myself. So that's another concern.
All right. Thank you very much. All right.
Hi, I'm Marcel Perry. I'm at 148 Crescent Road, right across the street. And I first want to say that I appreciate that they were keeping the design, architecture, and kind of the character of the building, so I appreciate that. And as far as moving the garage closer to the road, my concern is the same with Linda, is the parking is prohibitively difficult in that area, and there's a lot of cars that are from people that live on Hill Path that don't have any garage or opportunity for garage. And those spaces are really needed for that. And there's nobody in the neighborhood has only one car except for Linda. I think she's the only one person in the neighborhood who has one car. So there's many of the neighbors, and I'm guilty of taking some of those spaces onto the road as well. So my concern of moving the garage closer to the street so that it doesn't have that additional parking spot is a concern for me. I think that that's a valuable thing to maintain that space of having another parking place off of the street. That's about it.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else? Musicians or anyone else? All right, we don't have anyone else stepping up to the microphone, so we will then close no, we won't close the public comment section because we're going to ask you, Mr. Riley, to stand up, and you were going to respond to some things. Yes. Yes. So he's asked you to move the studio. He's asked you to move it.
If we put the studio under the house, it would be a huge excavation because there's very little space under the floor. It's about 2 feet under the floor at the moment in the front. So to put a studio there would be quite an expense and an excavation that we don't feel is particularly a reasonable approach.
Understood. So anything else about what Mr. Harlock has thrown out about the design that you've got to try to mitigate it in some way?
Well, if we were to lower the garage, then we'd exceed the slope of the driveway so that it wouldn't meet standards. It can't be more than 8% slope for turnaround and parking. And we think we've done a pretty good job here. And I would encourage you to pass this project with conditions so that we can move along.
All right. Question for you in that you've got a soils engineer, no doubt, on board, or will.
Absolutely.
Right. And that they will address
Yes.
any of the soil stability and rock wall stability.
And I've drawn a cross-section for our privacy of what would happen if we were standing up and looking down. And I think the cross-section works to provide, we want privacy too, and we've told the gentleman that we'd be happy to accommodate that for him as a privacy fence. Privacy screen, I think, is the proper definition.
Okay. So, with that said, there are some pittosporums in these oaks that they would like to have trimmed to restore a view that has obviously not been there for some time. So, it's not mentioned that you would do that anywhere in the documents, but would you trim some of these trees to restore some of the bay view that they had 20 years ago?
I see no reason for that to be a problem, do you?
I think we need to study. So I'm Mark Gordon, and I'd like to study and see what makes sense for everything. But we have no problem trimming trees. But I don't want to be told you have to trim a tree from a neighbor for one particular purpose. So, but we don't have a problem trimming trees. We do it on our own property, and we will do our best to get along with neighbors.
Okay. All right, we're getting outside the bounds of the way that we like to conduct these, but thank you very much for that.
Sorry to keep you so late.
That's all right. You know, we're to a point here. So, with that said, I think, do you guys feel like you've heard enough from these individuals to close the public comment, or do you want to ask any of these guys any other questions?
I would like to ask the architect. Alex, I think this is a very nice design, really keeps in character of the house, and I did visit 135 and took a view from the window and from the balcony. And in looking at the recommendations, it seemed like what would provide one of the biggest enhancements on the view was this idea of moving the garage forward. And I hear the comments about parking, but it looks like it's going forward into what was listed as one of the public parking areas that's going to get moved. So there would still be, it would be an encroachment and require variance, but it would still have those 2 parking spaces, and you would still have the 1-car garage, and that would improve the view off the back with not a big expense from the standpoint of bringing that forward. They also ask about lowering the height of the roof along the back line, and I think I see what you're doing with the parapets and continuing that style and character of it. But from the backside, that's not really going to be, the clay tiles and the parapet itself wouldn't really be in view or be able to be appreciated. Could that be lowered so that it's basically a flat roof without a parapet in the back?
It can, yes. And my only concern is if we drop the parapet all the way to the roof, then the people uphill from us are looking on a flat roof with puddles in it and leaves, So, but it can. We can take a couple feet off of there.
Yeah.
Easily.
I mean, they're still looking at a flat roof with puddles. They just, would see a parapet around 3/4 of it.
Yeah, we can alter that and work with the planners. Squeeze it down. We can.
And the issue of moving the garage forward,
It's very complicated getting into this. We only have 19 feet between our setbacks. That's why the addition is the shape that we have it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we move that up, then getting a stairwell out of the garage, it's highly complicated to make it work nicely. We put a lot of energy into trying to do that.
Can you pull up the?
You can see
Hang on a second,
we don't have a lot of room to build this house in.
Mhm.
We're pushing the limits in all directions.
Right, so does that answer your question about the parapet and the roof and the garage location? To the extent that you would make a statement about it?
I guess I would like to look at that garage issue a little bit more to see if there wasn't a way to move the majority of it forward or certainly somewhat forward, because that seems to be the biggest impediment to the view that Richard was expressing.
I don't really believe that there's much of any view blocked by this building. If we move this, you're looking at the rest of the house that's already there in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're looking straight, if you look at the photographs where the story poles were, you're looking perpendicular to his building.
Mm-hmm.
And our building's in a row, and it actually, it's looking straight down this direction here is where they want us to take the building out here, and we got it here anyway. It's already there, the existing house.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just trees.
So if the garage moved back, this would still be here, and this is even further out. So even though it's lower, it is further out, yes. Right. And the redwood that's over here is on a neighbor property, is that correct?
Yeah, we don't do
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Hang on a sec, Michael. Jennifer, you had a question for
I was
me?
just gonna ask Phil, can you pull up the photo that you had where it showed where the relocated public parking spaces were going and the
That's right here.
encroachment?
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh, I thought, and then he had it outlined though, but
Yeah.
I felt like it was a little bit easier. I don't know
Yeah,
why
so-
I'm having a hard time following this.
Yeah, it doesn't change relative to the center of the road or anything. It's in the same line. Yeah.
So here's the old space right here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the old space, the new space is right here.
And then
So the whole rectangle gets
the
shifted.
two-car it's a parking pad
Right, this is the drive, this is the
or
parking pad in
driveway,
front of the
and then the garage
single
behind
car
it.
garage, right.
And the studio is right below the garage.
Yes,
Okay,
right,
got it.
right. This is the notch, so here's.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Being that we're still sort of open, Mr. Harlock, you wanted to make a comment in response?
Just Thank you. Just to clarify a couple of points, I believe I read in the staff report someplace that as proposed, the face of garage to edge of pavement, something like 29 feet. So coming forward is definitely a possibility, and to, with recognition of these ladies' concerns about, there's no question the cars will clear the right-of-way, even if it came forward 5 feet. And I just wanted to point out that the view analysis had to do more with views this way, not directly east. I mean, they obviously realized. So a lot of their concern has to do with, improving that angle, which moving it forward would do. And then finally, and I'll shut up, the section that we saw from the architect had the garage elevation exactly at the street elevation, almost level apron. And so I'm not sure what the concern was with dropping the garage down a little bit. Certainly could be steeper than 8%, and with transitions included. So even coming down a couple of feet, moving this forward 5 feet, which I think would help the front of the house, are all very doable. Even the studio could follow the shape of the garage and not stick out 5 feet. These are all things that would help.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harlock. All right. We're going to close this and bring it back up here. So we have before us some options that have been raised in moving the garage, lowering the garage and studio, or leaving the application as it is. And I will ask each of you where you stand with this so that either we decide to continue this or take a vote on this tonight. So that said, Dr. Bundy.
I understand the complexity of getting to the rest of the house with moving the entire garage 5 feet forward, so thanks for pointing that out. That was also my understanding, that trying to deal with the view with the height of the garage at that corner as well as all the way to the back, and as Michael pointed out, it was the angle out there. So I guess I would still like to see the garage move 5 feet forward, but allow the stairwell to continue as it is with, a bump out at the back of the garage that would take you into that stairwell and to the rest of the house. And I think the losing the parapet, changing that in the back would be, helpful from this standpoint of their view also.
Okay. Nicolo.
Okay, so going back to try to be following protocol, there are findings that needs to be made, and we're talking about views. Now, I have not been inside because I was traveling, and so I just met with staff. So I will ask you, all of you, if the obstructions of these views, in your opinion, were primary views, number one, to justify, even to consider changing some of the design that is proposed as a result of not being able to meet the findings. So that's, if views are impacted, primary views, then maybe there is a point that needs to be looked at, and maybe the design should be revised or at least proposed. If the views are not primary views, therefore maybe not considered significantly affecting the privacy and so on and so forth, then maybe shouldn't be requested. So other than that, okay, and then another, I'd like to clarify my position on that this segment. I concur with staff therefore, because then, goes back to the design as proposed, I concur 100%. I think it applies to above 12 feet, because if you only had 12 feet, then you would be within that setback. So the 12 feet are justified to be where they are, and then above it wouldn't be. So in my opinion, in my interpretation, it's correct what staff is doing, therefore the proposal meets the intent of the code. And so I think with what I know and what I've seen, I could make all the findings that are shown by staff, except again for finding number 3 of the design review, which is the views. I don't know if they're affected or not in terms of their primary views, and that should be discussed. And then number 9 of the Christmas tree hill. Lastly, variance. As I was telling staff, I mean, is an easy one, but even that could have been even a condition of approval, just to twist that little concrete pad, which now is even more into the setback. And as far as the little fence, I don't think it's a problem in the sense that, it's all the findings are met.
So just for clarification regarding the concrete pad, so the concrete pad that is not aligned with the garage is the existing concrete pad.
Right.
And so that eschewed concrete pad will no longer exist. Am I correct, Alex? Right. So if built as proposed, the concrete pad and the garage will all be in line with each other. Everything's a right angle.
Right.
Oh, this you're looking at all rectangles. So and then secondly, regarding views, as you look at that finding, there is no delineation of primary views or secondary views or any type of views in that finding. They're just saying that the commission will need to determine whether the project significantly and adversely affects the views of any nearby residents.
Right. I mean, right. In my own interpretation, significantly and adversely meaning is the intent of having views, and so there are like different type of views and different type of importance of views and some that qualify a view that is important and therefore significantly being affected. If it's a tiny little views from a bathroom, for example, it wouldn't be significant, in my opinion. So I think that still should be defined what kind of views is before we jump into saying let's change the design. I think that's it.
All right. Go ahead.
Since Commissioner Caldera didn't have an opportunity to visit the site, and I think other commissioners confirm, the two views of the photographs are, like I said, are from the dining room and the rear deck.
Right.
Those are the two. That's the floor plan of 135.
Right, there are no other views to discuss. Right, okay. Jennifer?
I can make the findings on this application. I don't find the views that are impacted to be significant or adversely impacted, given that the existing residence is at the same angle, and I think their primary view, which would be the bay view if the trees weren't there, could be restored with some tree trimming, but I'm not gonna get into whose responsibility that is, so I'll let the neighbors work that out.
That's an issue, for staff. No, just kidding. So.
Oh, wait, can I make one more comment, which I
Yes.
think you'll hit on also, but one of the conditions for approval that I would have is that the issue that the neighbor downslope brought up, that I'm assuming there's a civil engineer who could provide a letter confirming that they don't have any concerns about this wall or downward pressure on the mud or slope to that house, given.
Well, as we
Shooting
know,
range.
the building department will require the complete evaluation with the soils report and the
Okay.
structural engineer before issuing a permit, and it will address anything that they have found on the site relative to the soil conditions.
Okay, so that's
So,
covered already. Okay,
It-
thank you.
It becomes a part of the future documents. And in this view of the bay, it's really unobstructed except for the pittosporum, and it appears that all three property owners have some part of these pittosporum that are growing up here. Regarding someone's comment about the location of the fence down at the bottom of the property, if you guys issue a right to trespass, you could do nothing with what's there if you issue that right to trespass, or you ask each other to move the fence to where it is. So that means a survey, and somebody goes out there and plots a line in the ground, and you put a fence up on it, and everybody's happy. Otherwise, you just say, he can trespass on my land until I tell him to get off, and that's the way it works. With regard to the view through that window, I did not find it to be significant and adverse to there. I have lived with views of homes out my living room window and seen the corner of their house and so forth, and I don't think it blocks a view because there's a further section of the house and further trees down the hill that actually block the view. And so while the corner of the house might be the closest thing to them, there are other trees that block, and you guys have to take that up on who's going to trim what trees. And it's clearly been many, many years since those oaks were trimmed at all to allow a bay view. They're 10, 15 feet above that horizon line. It's been a long, long time. And beyond it, on the next property down the hill appears to be a large redwood, which would block the view as well. I don't know who owns that tree. It's pretty significant, but it's all in that view. So that said, I would move for approving it, making the findings as is. So that said, it's up to somebody to make a motion here with or without conditions.
I can make a motion. I'm not sure we decide.
Or I can. You want me to make it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 17001, an approval of design review and variance application number PL 20170037 DRC and PL 20170054 VAR to add 1,202 square feet of living space and a 259 square foot one-car garage to the existing 748 square foot house, and a variance to allow a portion of one of the required parking spaces and a 5-foot tall fence to encroach over the front property line at 141 Crescent Road.
Second.
Commissioner Friedman.
Aye.
Commissioner Bundy.
No.
Commissioner Caldera.
Aye.
Commissioner Chase.
Aye.
There is
Appeal
an
rights.
opportunity to appeal. Applications can be filed with the planning department. The appeal application needs to be filed within 10 days of this evening, and a fee of $300 is required.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so I would move for an adjournment and a delay of.
Second.
Adjourned.